across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham and this, of course, is the home of common sense. As departed and denuded by Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States of America. We're still talking about Donald Trump. He had his first full day in charge yesterday as President in the White House. And already you've heard him on the news there talking about people not being very nice to America, the European Union in particular not being very nice to America. He's coming up with all kinds of reasons why he is going to change the way not only America operates in the world, but how the world operates where it comes to America. He's fired 1,000 people already. He's pardoned 1,500 people. He's appointed all manner of people in jobs which are going to be being done very, very well indeed. And you are still, I have to say, very enthused by the fact that Donald Trump is now the president.
Hold on tight, people, because the Trump is coming for you.
Oh, to be a young American child in school with inspirations to take the flag to Mars and plant it on another planet.
What a new day for America.
The revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense.
It is all about common sense, and that's what we're all about, of course. We are the home of common sense, the world headquarters of common sense. It started here. It is now spread to the United States of America, to Washington, D.C., and it will cross the land and the sea because common sense is the only way forward. We have to report to you, though, I'm afraid our Prime Minister still does not appear to have any common sense. He appeared on our show yesterday with his press conference at Downing Street, 8:30, where he attempted to basically point out that the reason that he withheld information, and he admitted doing it quite deliberately, the reason he withheld information on the Southport killer was that he did not want to prejudice a trial. He was immediately taken to task by a whole series of journalistic questions from Beth Rigby at Sky to Harry Cole from The Sun, all of whom said, listen, Prime Minister, we all know what the rules are when it comes to contempt of court. We've all been through journalist school. We all know what the law is. The bottom line about the law is that you don't have to completely clam up and give no information out whatsoever just because somebody has been arrested. And, of course, we all know that the judge and jury and executioner in all of these cases when it comes to terrorism is completely and utterly inconsistent. We know, for example, that they called the Manchester Arena bomber a terrorist pretty early on in the investigation. He was not going to have a trial, of course, but they decided he was a terrorist without having to worry about what the legal definition was. The same goes for Joe Cox's killer. He was a far-right terrorist. The same goes for the man who drove into a crowd of people in London, in North London, at a mosque. He was branded a terrorist straight away. You know, so they've been completely inconsistent, and Keir Starmer is hiding behind something for which I think is going to get him into an awful lot of trouble. This morning, he's written for The Sun, and he talks about the Amazon killer, a man who went and did that terrible rampage in Southport, was able to buy a knife on Amazon. It doesn't matter where he bought the knife, does it? He wants to clamp down on the internet. If that's where he wants to go, that's another story altogether. We'll bring you all of that, plus loads more. This is Morning Glory. Theo Usherwood is here. Very good morning to you, Theo.
Very good morning to you.
There's a whole series of different types of headlines, but much of them are focusing on the fact that both Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer yesterday wanted to kind of give the impression that the reason that this horrible, horrible episode happened in Southport, where 3 little girls were murdered in cold blood, loads of other people were stabbed, is because of the internet. And let's face it, it's not because of the internet. Yes, he was able to buy a horrible knife on Amazon. Yes, he was able to order it. And yes, he was able to get it delivered to his house. But by far and away, the biggest number of stabbings that happen in this country happened with a kitchen knife.
Yes, and he could have bought it. He could have bought it anywhere. The rules aren't tight enough. Harry Cole's got the exclusive story in The Sun that they're looking basically at expanding technology. From my understanding, it's already in use, where you have to use a live selfie and then upload a scan of your passport or digital ID, and then you can go, and then you can, and people can use that at the moment if you want to join like a hire car club or something like that. And they want to do that for knives on Amazon to stop people buying it. But it's worth mentioning, of course, this would only kick in when this would be necessary to prove you're 18. Yeah. But Barack Obama was only a couple of weeks off his 18th birthday when he went and committed this horrific, murderous attack.
And if he hadn't been able to get a knife on Amazon, he would have just taken one out of his mother's drawer, wouldn't he?
Yeah, Yeah, he could have got a knife. He could have got a knife anyway. But you know,
you could steal one from a supermarket. I mean, you know, what's the big deal?
Yes, and you mentioned, of course, you know, the government has yesterday when we had that early press statement from Keir Starmer at 8:30, and then the follow-up House of Commons statement from Yvette Cooper, is trying to get ahead of the story because there are some difficult questions. Difficult questions which came up in the House of Commons from the likes of Nick Timothy, former advisor to Theresa May, now an MP, saying, hang on a moment, why didn't you tell, why weren't the British public told about the background Radik Obama much earlier on? And interestingly, there's a story on the front page of the Telegraph. Police claim they were gagged over Southport terrorist, revealing details, background details that Merseyside detectives had wanted to provide details about the killer's background, including his religion and crimes, but were warned not to do so by the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. Interestingly, yesterday, Yvette Cooper, when she responded to Nick Timothy, was like, no, this was a decision for the CPS, nothing to do with us. They didn't want to prejudice the trial. But before somebody is charged with a crime, you can release details.
This is the thing. You know, before there's a charge, there are plenty of things that you can say about somebody who has been arrested. And I've always had arguments with lawyers over time in newspaper offices and now in broadcasting offices because, you know, there is a fair amount of wiggle room. And one of the things that's very clear about the law, and Keir Starmer should know this better than anybody, having been supposedly the chief public prosecutor, as he keeps reminding us, is that the law is a movable feast. It is not static. It is never written in stone in a way, because the reason why people go to court is because they challenge the law. And the fact remains that if you are the defendant and you have a lawyer, your lawyer will be making all sorts of arguments in court on your behalf, which will change whatever you're being charged with. You know, so the idea that there are it's very Starmer-like, isn't it? The idea that there's a very sort of strict set of rules.
He's a lawyer.
By which, but he's not a very good lawyer, because all lawyers that I know are people who understand that everything is an argument and you can argue about anything. This guy, Starmer, seems to think that there's a framework which is like a straitjacket outside of which you cannot go. And that's simply not true.
If you have lawyers here, I'm sure they come up and they go, well, Mike, you could do this or you could do that.
Exactly.
And this is the implications of doing one or the other.
And here's what you can't do, because that would prejudice the trial. But there's plenty that you can do that won't.
But from my experience of court reporting and from crime reporting, and I did quite a number of years at it early on in my career, everything kicks in, everything gets serious at the point of charge. And there was a window before charge.
That's when sub judice begins.
When a criminal is charged, that's when everybody has to be on their best behaviour and ensure that they don't prejudice criminal proceedings.
I mean, there has been, I would say, of late, a kind of a creeping caution, if you like, from some lawyers when it comes to media reporting, because they'd rather be safe than sorry. So some of them will say, well, there is an arrest, so the case is active. Well, yes, but there isn't a charge. So you can't be accused of being sub judice, because until there's a charge, there's no court case.
That was always, and I remember reporting on cases, and you could go to the scene of a crime. You could get some quite a lot of detail about what had happened and what is the background to either the alleged perpetrator or the actual details of what happened at that crime. At that scene, which may have just happened a few hours previously, and you can report on that. But when the police announce the charge, put out a press release saying an individual has been charged, then you have to be much more cautious, and that remains right through until the very end of the court case, when of course all of the details can be released when you have a guilty verdict at the end of a court case.
Exactly right. And it seems to me that Keir Starmer, and many people have made this point, Nick Timothy among them, and also Nigel Farage and Richard Tice, who's on the show later on, they're making the case that he has used this to hide behind, and the fact that he withheld information is definitely true. He's admitted it, but the reason why he withheld it, he's pretending, is because of a sub judice situation, when it's not. Let's have a look at what Harry Cole from The Sun actually said and asked him about yesterday.
Terrorism, or what constitutes terrorism. And my concern in this case is that we have clearly got an example of extreme violence, individualised violence, that we have to protect our children from and our citizens from. And it is a new threat. It's not what we would have usually thought of as terrorism when definitions were drawn up, when guidelines were put in place, when the framework was put in place. And we have to recognise that here today, because I think most people would say, looking at the facts of this case, it's clearly extreme violence, it's clearly intended to terrorise. And I completely accept and understand that, and that is my view. Therefore, we have to make sure that the law and the framework for responding is appropriate to the new threat that we face. And there we will make whatever changes are necessary in the law to deal with it.
You see, there he's hiding behind it again, because he's saying that's my view, right? So first of all, he's not saying that's the law, saying that's my view. He talks about this new threat of a lone wolf type attacker. Well, it's not a new threat. You know, we've had that since London Bridge. We've had it since the Manchester Arena. We've had it in many ways throughout the course of the last, I would say, probably dozen years. But there's nothing new about lone wolf threats.
What's also interesting, and they're making it, they were trying to make, Keir Starmer was trying to make this distinction, Yvette Cooper was trying to make this distinction, is that this case wasn't picked up because there was a lack of ideology that was driving radical violence. So whilst there was there was clearly evidence that he was extremely violent, and he had a propensity to watch extremely violent material online, because there was there was this manual, but there was nothing that actually purported or supported the argument that he was driven by a particular ideology.
But everybody knows terrorism.
But that's rubbish, by the way.
Yeah, of course it is.
That's rubbish. And I'll tell you why that's rubbish, because they've already changed the way they're treating terrorism cases, because 162 cases were referred to prevent last year just because the person had looked up school shootings.
Yes.
Not all of those will have an ideology behind them. There'll be just lone teenagers sitting in their bedrooms, Googling away or YouTubing away, watching really violent material. They've already caught up.
Right.
They're already moving in that direction.
Exactly.
And that's why I just don't understand this argument that when you have an extreme act of violence, like what we saw in Southport last July, horrific, the police could have come in and said, actually, this is terrorism.
Yeah, and again, because the people of this country are not stupid, the people who watch this show are not stupid. They are perfectly capable of working these things out. They're perfectly capable of understanding what's going on. They know absolutely that if this had been a far-right act of terrorism, they would have been describing it as a far-right act of terrorism from the beginning. But they also would know that this is people looking for an excuse not to call it terrorism, because the question that nobody asked yesterday, and which I would like to ask Keir Starmer, if he ever had the cojones to come on this show, is basically, why are you so scared of calling it terrorism? What's the problem? Why can you not call it terrorism when it clearly is? And the answer to that question, of course, is because we don't want to inflame community tensions. That's what they mean. Well, they're worried that somebody will run down to the local mosque and set it on fire.
Yes.
Even if it's got nothing to do with Islam.
But clearly, when you looked at this, when we got the details of this case, there was a shred of evidence. There was this manual, this Al Qaeda manual, but actually this was not driven from everything that was come out of the case. This particular case was not driven by Islamist extremism. That was not the driving purpose. What was the driving purpose in this case, and it should be classed as terrorism, was just this obsession with violent material online.
But was there not a line, though, yesterday as well, in the knowledge of what happened when he was arrested, that he was shouting Allahu Akbar as he was stabbing the children?
I may be unsighted on. I'm unsighted on that. But there was when he was looking up material that led to him being referred to prevent. There was a whole host of things, like obviously there was MI5, there was the IRA, there were school shootings, as well as the Middle East, for example, and so forth, and therefore. The argument that was put forward by the prosecutors was made by Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer yesterday, Mike, was actually there was no underpinning ideology that meant that this could be classed as terrorism in this particular case.
But if you're reading an Al Qaeda manual, right, which is telling you how to attack people as a terrorist, you're a terrorist, right? You may well be an Islamic terrorist. If you're shouting Allahu Akbar as you're murdering young children, you're an Islamic terrorist. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care whether you were raised as a Catholic, or as a Church of England scholar, or as a Buddhist. You are an Islamic terrorist. As simple as that. But they're frightened of saying it. They won't say it.
Yeah, and Keir Starmer, he didn't say it yesterday. They won't say it. Yvette Cooper didn't say it yesterday, because I think you're right to say that they're terrified of it.
They're terrified of it. And why are they terrified of it is my question, and that's the question I'm going to be asking throughout the show today. Also, we're going to be talking to a series of legal experts to find out precisely what it is that you can say and that you can disclose, and why Keir Starmer didn't disclose what he didn't disclose is nothing to do with the law and everything to do with his cultural sensitivity, which he said yesterday he didn't want to be a factor. So, you know, he's kind of talking in doublespeak, isn't he? Because on the one hand, he's saying we need to be more transparent. He wasn't. We need to have no fear about upsetting cultural niceties. You know, that's exactly what he's been afraid of in the past. So, you know, he's calling for things to be changed, which are already within his gift to change.
I think what they were trying to do yesterday was they were trying to just pin it. And there is an argument to say, you know, the only person responsible for what happened is Radek Kubana, right? That he did what he did, and it was a horrific attack, terrorist attack in Southport. And what they were trying to do, and you talked about the internet and so forth, is to frame it in that particular way.
Yes.
So that it didn't become, you know, to your point, you know, he you know, this is where Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper are now launching these multiple local inquiries when it comes to the rape grooming gangs. That actually they're not, you know, they're saying they want, as you say, unburdened by cultural sensitivities and institutional.
Right. But they're the ones that have invented that particular framework. They're the ones who have wrapped themselves up in this blanket of cultural sensitivities, and that's why they don't say things. So it's their own fault. I mean, he's written in The Sun today, Sir Keir Starmer, on page 12, terrorism has changed, he says. We must guard against loners and misfits who threaten us, and I will root them out. But according to Alan in Merseyside, he said, does Starmer know what he's talking about? Terrorism hasn't changed. This monster isn't the first lone terrorist. Remember Joe Cox and David Amos. Starmer makes a fool of himself every time he goes on TV. And that's true. You know, everything he said yesterday was knocked down, basically, by a series of very good questions from very well-respected and long-time journalists who know exactly what the laws are, and MPs who know exactly what the laws are around contempt of court. And how can he get that wrong? That's the thing that surprises me. He's meant to have been an expert in the law, and particularly criminal law, and he appears not to be.
What he's done, Mike, is he's taken the hardest line that a lawyer could take. Right? He's taken it as the sort of, as you pointed out, you said there's wriggle room. Yeah. There is wriggle room. He's taken the hardest line and he's applied it to this case, and then said anything outside of that, anything outside of that purview, anything outside of the parameters that have been set in this case will end up with Radek Kubana walking free from court and justice not being served. And that is not the case. No. Patently is not the case.
Definitely not.
Previous cases demonstrate that is not the case. Right. Before charge, you can release details about, and indeed, when you have charges, the pertinence of the charges, as we saw in October when the ricin charges were released, you know, come to light. So there is always going to be an element of factual reporting that journalists can do before a case reaches trial that does not prejudice the case, but is put out to reassure people as well. You know,
well, that's the other aspect.
You know, there's an element of public reassurance.
That's the other aspect, you know, because if he wasn't working alone, for example, and there was maybe more than one of him, or people were concerned that there might be more than one of him, because often in these cases there are other actors who have either helped them or who are planning to do something else. Surely the public in Southport deserve to be told whether this is a lone wolf, whether this is a lone terrorist, whether this is somebody who they believe is working with other people, just for their own safety.
Yes,
apart from anything else.
Yes, and people up and down the country will want to know, won't they? Are we going to see a copycat, or are we going to see other? You know,
was
is
he working with
part of
anybody
a cell?
Yeah,
exactly. All of those
questions. Let's just change the mood slightly, because we're going to return to Donald Trump coming up in a moment. Before we do that, let's have a look at David Lammy. You know, comical Lammy, as I like to call him, because he's changed his view a little bit on Donald Trump. Let's see what he says now.
We're marching because we are standing in solidarity with many Americans and communicating our huge disapproval with this president. A president who's said awful things during London's lowest moments of terrorism, who has attacked our democratically elected Mayor Sadiq Khan, a president who has retweeted far-right hatred of Britain First, the hatred that saw the death of Joe Cox. For all of those reasons and so much more, people are coming out in droves today to make it absolutely clear that Donald Trump is not welcome in our country.
I welcome the election of Donald Trump. We look forward to working with Donald Trump at this tough geopolitical moment, recognising that 77 million people voted for Donald Trump. He got more votes from young people, African Americans, Latinos than the Republican Party have got for some considerable time. We have a special relationship with the United States. It doesn't matter who's in the White House or number 10, and we look forward to working with Donald Trump over the next 4 years.
Yeah, he's not looking forward to working with you, though, is he? Let's face it, that is the most ridiculous volte-face I think anybody's ever seen. I mean, Keir Starmer, we pointed out yesterday, had done the same thing, but nobody has been quite as hypocritical as David Lammy. But we'll come back to that because, quite frankly, we're going to start counting, I think, on the Morning Glory show. This is day 2 of the Trump presidency. Still, so far, no conversations being had, as far as we know, between Keir Starmer and the White House. So let's just start that countdown clock now. Theo Rushwood is here. We've got plenty to talk about. Coming up, there's a row going on inside the Labour government about Heathrow and about net zero. Ed Miliband wants one thing, Rachel Reeves wants another. And Sadiq Khan's stuck in the middle, apparently. It's 6:23.
Breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court. Axel Rudo Cubana has pleaded guilty to murdering 3 young girls in the knife attack at the Taylor Swift-themed dance class.
The tragedy of the Southport killing must be a line in the sand for Britain. There has been a failure here, and I don't intend to let any institution of the state deflect from their failures, and I acknowledge that readily here. And so if the law needs to change to recognise this new and dangerous threat, then we will change it, and quickly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:26. I'm Mike Graham. Theo Usherwood is here. We're going to be looking through all the stories in the papers this morning, and while obviously the Southport story is front and centre of almost every single newspaper, there's still quite a lot of coverage, Theo, of Donald Trump, and day two about to happen today of his presidency, the second time around. Front page of the Daily Mail, how high fashion is waging a silent war against the Trumps, and that's a story about how all the sort of, fashion houses of America are not very happy about promoting whatever it is that they're wearing. They've got a picture of Ivanka Trump wearing a replica of Audrey Hepburn's dress, looking very glamorous. And I did say yesterday that there was a sort of glamorous return to Hollywood, to the West Wing, wasn't it?
The Commander-in-Chief ball was something else, and also the theatre. What I've been struck by the last couple of days, watching the inauguration, watching him, obviously praise Baron Trump, and Baron Trump standing up and holding his hand to his ear to lap it up. Right. It's the theatre of American politics. Yes. They can do it better than anyone else.
They really can. Did you also see, and I don't know whether you did, but a fascinating little sort of, vignette, I suppose, where right at the end of the inauguration ceremony, Baron Trump goes over to speak to Joe Biden, and depending on the angle you see, he leans into him and says something, and in one view of it is Biden looking quite happy that he's shaking his hand, but as soon as the words are spoken, Biden's face really falls and it becomes like a sort of scowl. So everybody, of course, speculating, what did Baron Trump say to him? Did he say, get lost, you old git, stop insulting my dad or something? I mean, who knows?
I don't know. I thought their reaction and Harris's reaction throughout that, throughout that speech from Donald Trump was just they just
had to sit there,
and they had to
and people were standing up around them, standing ovations, applause, amazing. Yesterday, Trump got a bit of his own medicine, I suppose, back. He was sitting in, I think it was Washington Cathedral, and he was listening to the Right Reverend Marianne Edgar Bude, who obviously hadn't gone through the Trump commencement ceremony process because she somehow slipped through the net because she's obviously a bit woke. Have a look at this.
In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. Some who fear for their lives.
They're all sitting there going, who let this maniac in?
How did it get through
Why
vetting?
Did this speech not get vetted? And what the hell is she talking about?
Donald Trump's
Trump's just going, sorry?
Stony face.
Yeah. They're all kind of going, what the hell?
J.D. Vance, sort of whispers to Usha, his wife, how?
Yeah, right.
How
you
did
can
this
see
one get
they're
through?
all going, what?
Yeah.
I thought this was all over, so we weren't expecting to see much of her anymore. I think she'll be whatever the opposite of pardoned is. That's what she'll be. In the Mail today, day one, and Trump pardons 1,500 MAGA writers and tells 1,000 officials you're fired. And also a great piece from Tom Leonard in New York. How is a man addicted to Big Macs and Diet Coke whose only exercise is running in a golf buggy and who only sleeps 5 hours a night? So fighting fit at 78. The next thing it will be the Trump lifestyle diet, won't it?
Yes.
If you want to live to 78 and be, as virile as this man and as capable as this man mentally, eat loads of Big Macs, drink loads of Coke. The fact that he doesn't drink, I'm sure, is a factor.
Yes, and of course, actually, it was interesting, wasn't it, when the Democrats, when Joe Biden was in the race to be, for a second term, age wasn't an issue, and then, of course, as soon as Joe Biden had to exit the contest and was replaced by Kamala Harris, then age became an issue for the Democrats. But, in terms of Trump and his ability to deal with those criticisms, he batted them away, and it was inevitable in the end, wasn't it? But he's obviously he's just one of these people. He's a bit like Margaret Thatcher, maybe. She only slept 4 hours a night, just driven and just attacks the day every single day.
Absolutely. And the front page of the Times today has got the story that quite a few other papers have picked up on, and this is the threat to foreign firms, basically. Trump threat to double tax. President Trump has threatened to impose steep tax rises on foreign companies and overseas nationals working in the US as he announced investments worth up to $500 billion in America's artificial intelligence infrastructure. AI is definitely going to be, Keir Starmer made his little AI announcement the other day. This is proper.
Yes, I mean they're using the FT's got a report on this, Financial Times, a 90-year-old provision in the US tax code, section 891, if you want to look it up. And basically they're going to impose punitive taxes on foreign firms, and then what they're going to do is where there are deals where US firms have been punished, they're basically going to withdraw from those. And it's likely, there's an OECD pact which was signed, which allowed, foreign overseas countries to tax US firms. He's ripping all of that out. It's going to be ruthless.
Yeah.
This is going to be, and I'm not quite sure.
Because he only cares about America at the end of the day.
I'm not quite sure the penny has dropped in our dear Foreign Office. Because this is going to be bumpy, and he's unashamedly going to put the US first.
Of course.
And it's not just going to be tariffs, it's going to be tax. We know he's looking at taxes to ensure that American companies do well. And at the same time, we've got, front page of the Mail, Reeves hit by biggest job slump since COVID. She's jetting off to Davos to try and persuade...
She's speaking, I think, today, her and Jonathan Ashworth.
The billionaires in Davos to come and invest in the United Kingdom. Whereas where they've put up taxes by 40 billion quid last budget, over in the United States, Donald Trump's cutting taxes. We're going to see whose strategy wins, but I have a suspicion which is going to be the more attractive jurisdiction.
Funnily enough, we had a voice note, I think it was, last week from somebody who works in AI in the West Country somewhere, and she told us that, they're running this company, but they can't get anybody foreign to come and work here because, one, they don't like the tax structure, two, they think the schools aren't very good, and they're too expensive if you want to put the kids in private school. So people are not coming to this country to work from foreign fields because it's just not a very pleasant environment.
And they're going to close. And they're going to close the non-dom loophole. Which is, and I wonder whether actually, I say it out loud, but whether Reeves actually backs down on this. What they want to do is they basically want to introduce a loophole which affects inheritance. So if you're an overseas investor, you come to base yourself in this country, then you're obviously going to be you're going to be taxed on your earnings overseas as well. And then they're going to close the loophole for inheritance.
So why would you bother coming?
Why would you ever think to come to this country and invest?
But this is the thing. I mean, Darren Jones was out there at the weekend, once again speaking for the Treasury, and he didn't seem to understand the concept that if you continue to tax people who are very wealthy to the point where they don't wish to come to the country, your tax benefit goes down as a government. Your revenue disappears because they're not going to come here, so they're not going to pay any tax. They're already paying quite a lot of tax here. Now they're not going to pay any tax, and they're going to move away.
These people,
how is that worth doing?
And it affects, the thing that the thing that they're after, which is economic growth. These people, they're really clever. They look at spreadsheets, they look at the numbers, and they compare what the tax implications are of various jurisdictions around the world. Italy, under Giorgia Meloni, has introduced a new system, by the way, that actually makes Italy more attractive.
Well, you will never pay more than £100,000 in tax in 1 year, right? Something like that.
Something like that. And as a result, Italy, which you think is, an economy in the south of Europe that has traditionally not been a powerhouse in EU terms or in Europe terms, it is seeing the net benefit of that. They look at these people, look at their spreadsheets, they compare the different jurisdictions, what the tax implications are, how likely, of course, that affects how likely it is for them to get investment, because people would, investors want return, and they make a decision on that basis. And if you're making it less attractive, if Britain, when they do those sums, these billionaires or millionaires do their sums, and they compare Britain to Italy or any other country or United States, and they think, actually, I don't think it's worth it because I could invest my money.
I remember going to Italy, went to Italy on holiday 2 years ago, and I was laughing with my kids. I said, when I used to come here when I was your age, basically we used to laugh at Italy about how badly run it was, about how ridiculously often they changed their leaders, about how often the governments fell, and how ludicrous the whole economy was. And I said, now, actually, it seems like a sea of calm when you compare it to Britain, where everything, and this was before the Labour Party even got in, and I said to them, my kids, I was like, Britain is the new Italy, and Italy's the old Britain, But anyway, we'll come back to that. More stories as well, of course, about what's going on inside the Labour government, because there's more rows than you can shake a stick at. Let's get a voice note from Phil.
Good morning, Mike. Phil from Chesterfield. It's easy then, isn't it? Let's solve all knife crime and just ban Amazon from the UK, and then everything's sorted. Everything will be wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Keir Starmer, once again, has got it completely and utterly wrong. You can't blame Southport on the internet. That's not going to work. Theo Rushford's here. We're going to talk coming up about the row between Sadiq Khan and Rachel Reeves. We're going to also talk about Spain banning Brits from going there and buying houses. And also, who is going to be the new US ambassador? Because it might not be Peter Mandelson. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the Morning Glory, 6:39. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. One from Jill in Berkshire who says, "Morning, Mike. Once again, Starmer is trying to steer this horrific act of terrorism by this vile individual away from the connection to Islam. Why is he so weak? It needs stopping." Love the show. I look forward to 6 a.m. these days. Well, so do I, Jill. I had so much to talk about. Let's get a voice note from Tony.
Morning, Mike. It's Tony from Nottingham. I think I can speak for the rest of the country. We all know that stuff's been covered up with Southport, and stuff's been covered up with this grooming rape gang thing, and the people of the country are just not going to be content with sort of mealy-mouthed words from Keir Starmer. We know it in our bones what's been happening, and the truth needs to come out. You can't just continue like this and just be kicked into the long grass.
Exactly right. And I mean, this is typical, isn't it? And we'll move off this subject, but we'll move back into it, I'm sure, later on in the show. Eventually, the problem for Keir Starmer is that his MO now is that he kind of sets out his stall. He decides, right, I'm going to go out there and make a statement. And instead of sort of calming the waters, and instead of sorting out the system and making sure that everybody now understands we're on this page, he sort of makes it worse.
Yes.
He doesn't seem to have the capability of calming a situation down. Like, remember when he came out with the far-right thugs and in the midst of all the riot stuff and started saying we were going to, we're going to prosecute people to the fullest extent of the law. That wasn't what people needed to hear at that point.
No.
They needed to hear, look, I understand why people are angry, but you can't be doing this.
Yes.
That's what he should have said.
Yes, so he goes into sort of straight-laced lawyer mode. You know, I'm the former DPP.
Right. You've broken the law.
You've broken the law, and then comes down in that sort of rather headmasterly approach that he has.
It's a bit like he'd be the guy that would prosecute you for driving too fast to the hospital because your wife's about to have a baby.
Yes.
And he'd go, here's your parking ticket.
And you'd say, well, hang on a moment,
right
my wife's in the back and about to have a baby.
Right.
Can you just show me a little bit of discretion? No, there's your parking ticket.
And that's his problem.
And people don't necessarily warm to that, do they? They think, hang on a moment,
No, he's a Jobsworth. At the end of the day, you're a Jobsworth.
Could you just overlook that parking ticket?
Exactly.
That ticket.
Right, exactly right. Well, let's talk about the Miliband brothers, because the Miliband brothers have often been on opposite sides of the argument. Over in America, we've got a story in the newspaper saying that former Foreign Secretary David Miliband has been lobbying Sir Keir Starmer's Downing Street team to become the UK's ambassador to the US, given that Lord Mandelson now might be in trouble because Trump doesn't want him.
No. So Number 10 were very clear about this. I was in the briefing on Monday, and they were very clear about this, Mike, that they supported Lord Mandelson. They think he's an excellent candidate, that Donald Trump will value his expertise, considerable expertise, and that they see that Donald Trump will approve his appointment or his recommendation from the British government to be the UK ambassador to Washington. But it's pretty obvious right now from those speaking around Trump that actually
he's not keen.
That Donald Trump isn't keen on Peter Mandelson, and that's why this story has emerged about David Miliband saying, "Well, listen, I can be Plan B.
I can help you out.
I can help you out."
Yeah,
because
what a
if
nice
he
man.
vetoes, but this would be highly unusual. It would be highly embarrassing.
Yeah.
And any talk, there was talk at the beginning of the week that Keir Starmer and Donald Trump, that special relationship endures, and they'd be sitting down within weeks to discuss everything from trade to to Chagos Islands.
The king,
the king would be wheeled out to invite them, and of course we know his relationship and his fondness for Prince William's beard. It would this would be it'd be a fine relationship. Everything's going to be fine and dandy. I'm not sure it is.
It's not.
And the obvious one of the first decisions that Trump can really make his mark and show his disapproval for the British government, and ultimately, as somebody who lives in this country and pays taxes in this country, I think we all should be worried about this. This is not a good thing. Nobody celebrates there not being a good relationship between the UK and the US. It doesn't do us any favours.
But he has, on the face of it, he's moved the Churchill statue back into the bust, back into the White House.
It should be a good relationship.
It should be, but also Donald Trump is a clever guy, and he will make Starmer work for it, is my suggestion. And it may well be that Mandelson ends up getting the job, but Trump wants to put him through the ringer first, and he wants to make him wait, and he'll probably wait for him to beg him to call him. He'll make him wait for that. He plays the game, doesn't he?
Yeah. And he's
the art of the deal.
He's very astute like this, and obviously comparisons have been made previously to some sort of like mobster boss, but there is something true to it that if you and he forgave J.D. Vance was scathing about Trump previously, but he's his vice president. But if you kiss the ring, if you go up and you say, "I'm sorry,
I made a
mistake," then he's willing to accommodate you. What he doesn't like, and I think this was where it was heading, particularly at the beginning of last week with the Chagos Islands deal, was people thinking that they can pull the wool over his eyes, or that he's a bit, he's stupid, and that they can somehow just get round him.
Which, of course, he's very much not. Now, meanwhile, back here, Ed Miliband, crazy Ed Miliband, as some people call him, he's been in front of another committee, this time in the House of Lords. Here he is talking about net zero.
You can hold two truths in your mind at the same time. One, that the transition is unstoppable, and secondly, it's not going nearly fast enough. And I think both truths are correct. That the world is moving.
I mean, the trouble with Ed Miliband is he's got a one-track mind, right? All he talks about is net zero. Well, it is unstoppable in some ways because he keeps pushing it, but in America, it is stoppable because they've just stopped it, right? They've basically gone, net zero, forget about it. Drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill.
Doesn't sound like net zero to me.
Drill, baby, drill is the biggest stopper on net zero. And if you've got the American president, of course, contribution to CO2 emissions in globally there is no greater contribution than America and China and India, and we contribute less than 1%. We will be sort of scraping the molecules off the side of the chimneys. The carbon molecules. That's how significant Ed Miliband's policy of net zero is going to be. It is nothing. In the grand
and also
scheme
his mad crusade is not even shared inside of the cabinet by the looks of it, because we've got a big story in the Telegraph today on page 2. Sadiq Khan poised to lead a Labour rebellion against Rachel Reeves over her backing for a third runway at Heathrow Airport. We talked about this yesterday. She needs growth. She's sort of mono focused on that. Wants growth in every single aspect of the economy. So she wants more air traffic. She wants more planes coming into Heathrow. She wants more planes planes leaving Heathrow. She wants to expand Luton Airport as well.
And Gatwick.
So, we're talking about a massive expansion of airports, which is hardly green.
No.
So now there's going to be a row between Sadiq Khan, presumably, and Miliband and Rachel Reeves.
Yes. And what's quite interesting, and I was talking to some friends about this, is that when we think back to the days of the Conservatives and the rows that went on, they were always very quiet. They were good at branding their little factions within the Conservative Party. You had the five families, you had the ERG, the One Nationers. They're very good at having their groups. In Labour, it's a little more opaque. They're not so. The factions within Labour are not so obvious. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist.
Well, Darren Jones was talking at the weekend about how they have these little working groups inside of the cabinet. And the way he was talking, it sounded like there's thousands of them. And all these little kind of cliques, if you like, of sort of 4 or 5 ministers who sit over there in this room, talk about something, and then they all go to another room, and a couple of other people drop out, a couple of other people come in. It's all they do.
It means you can push people to the side. It's about which mini cabinets you're not in.
Right.
But within the Labour Party, there is a split. There's a fundamental split. In the general election, Labour were threatened by the Green vote, by the lefties. They were worried that they were going to lose their base, and by this I'm talking about the Jeremy Corbyn supporters, the Corbynistas. That they were going to. There was a worry that they would float off to the Greens, and the Greens won with sort of 4 MPs or so. Right. So there's a real concern about the Green Party.
But also the Greens were sort of overtaken by Islamists, weren't they, as we saw in the north in local by-elections.
That's another
which is another weird thing,
But
I mean, when you say green, do you mean the Hamas bandana, or do you mean actually cleaning up the planet?
And the problem that they had was they went with the Green vote, and that's why Ed Miliband got the job of being, the person in charge of net zero. He clearly believes it, right? He's not there to make up the numbers. He's there to drive through
he's a zealot.
This agenda. But at the same time, that doesn't square with a chancellor who wants economic growth, because you want to build the runway, you want to build the 3rd runway or double capacity at the Gatwick. The newts have to go somewhere.
I'm afraid so.
The great crested newts, there will be a pond. There will be a rare lake or rare birds congregating around a lake, and that lake will need to be filled in and bulldozed over and a runway built. It doesn't happen.
And we've already been told, and this is on the front page of the Times, page 1, we'll have to break in a second, that basically Labour are going to curb environmental quangos as well. So you bring up the subject of newts there. In an effort to unblock the planning system, regulators will no longer be able to demand that developers reduce the potential environmental harm caused by new buildings. So the newts, bad news for the newts, bad news for the bats.
Yes, the 100 million bat tunnel would never get built.
You wouldn't have to worry about any of that. So I mean, they can't have it both ways, can they? It's either Rachel Reeves' way or the highway. And if you're Ed Miliband, you have to sit down and shut up, don't you?
Well, you'd have thought so, but Ed Miliband is he has his little fiefdom in net zero, in the Department for Energy and net zero. I wouldn't, given how badly it's gone for Rachel Reeves, and I don't want to be mischievous in this piece of commentary, Mike, but I wouldn't bet against Ed Miliband's.
Really?
I mean, Rachel Reeves, she's going for growth. We've got unemployment at a massive high. We saw what happened in the markets a couple of weeks ago, and how perilous her position was, as a result of that. And people were saying, well, is she going to last until this spending review at the end of March? I think there are questions where you might say, well, who's in the surer place? Is it Ed Miliband or Rachel Reeves?
Well, very interesting. Let's see. Let's get a voice note from Chris.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Theo. Chris from Epsom here. So, obfuscation and misdirection continue. I still like to know why they released a picture of him as a choir boy from Wales rather than the mugshot that we now see. A little bit different, aren't they?
They certainly are. I asked that question yesterday, Chris, and that, of course, is another question I would put to Keir Starmer, if he'd ever come in and subject himself to the theory and the practice of proper interrogation right here on Morning Glory. We've got some more coming up for you. Myself and Theo Usherwood, we're going to be talking about Davos. We're going to be talking as well about a big storm that's heading this way. And Spain. If you're thinking of buying a house there, don't bother. This is Talk.
now official government policy in America that biology is a fact. That's quite encouraging, isn't it?
Well, it is. And one of the things that came out was that if you are overseas right now and want to get back into America, and if your passport does not specify your actual correct biological sex, you have to get your passport reissued and you do not get to come back in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:54. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory and lots of great messages coming in. Chris from Wallasey says, Labour Party will be consigned to the dustbin of history before Rachel from accounts gets a single yard of concrete laid at Heathrow Airport. She needs growth now, not in 10 years' time. There is some truth to that. Let's talk about a story on the front page of The Sun. Lots of other papers have it as well. Pauline Quirke. Very well-known actress, you know, sort of part of the fabric, I suppose, of Britain's comedy background, really. Birds of a Feather she starred in. She's got dementia. Her husband is paying tribute to her, pages 6 and 7. My Pauline is stepping back, but she'll keep being an inspiration. And the reason I mention it is even if you're perhaps too young to remember Pauline Quirke and Birds of a Feather, dementia is one of those things that we read about all the time, but also so many families have to deal with in so many ways.
It affects millions of families up and down the country, and Steve Sheen, who is of course Pauline Quirke's husband, reveals in The Sun, and it's a very nice write-up that they've got on pages 6 and 7, sympathetic write-up. Yeah. You know, a household name, famous for that, for the wonderful comedy Birds of a Feather, as well as other shows as well. She's retiring now for a battle with dementia that she faces and her family will face. Yeah, and people face.
So many families do.
And it's you've got the heartache of losing your ability to do the basic things in life, and then your family have the heartache of watching you ebb away, and the recognition and the conversations and everything that you love about a person. Yes, this disease.
It's heartbreaking for a lot of people.
And then the care bills, the financial costs are crippling for dementia and Alzheimer's. People ending up in needing 24-hour care in a nursing home, care home.
And so many people as well losing their own home or what would be a family heirloom because they've had to sell it in order to pay for the care.
Care costs.
It's a terrible system.
£1,500, £2,000 a week. And Labour, you know, it sort of got overlooked by the Winter Fuel Allowance, and they did an announcement a couple of weeks ago where they basically, you know, there was a solution in place where the cost of, you know, care was going to be capped. Yes. They've done away with that now, and they claim the money wasn't there. But really, they should, you know, they're going to have to wait till 2028 for this review to be completed before the election. I mean, actually, this is a crisis that needs sorting.
They talk about tax bombshells and things like that, but you're right. I mean, the care bombshell for many families is going to cripple them.
Yes, and it will, and it does cripple them, and it means that people have to sell their homes. And these are the homes that they've worked hard for, and it's a complete lottery. Yeah. It just doesn't seem fair, and the state just isn't there to support in the way that because people are having to sell their homes.
Exactly, quite a sad story, but very well done in The Sun. Another story in The Sun is about, and I saw this yesterday, just before we finished the show, coming up to 10 o'clock yesterday morning. Suddenly David Beckham's face appeared on the TV screens in the studio, and what was he doing? He was at Davos, and I thought, this is the result of years and years and years of evolution at Davos. They've now finally got around to getting David Beckham there, which pretty much tells you that it's almost like now no longer worth going to. I'm not being horrible about David Beckham, but you know, I mean, if you're sort of one of the so-called elites that go to the World Economic Forum to get your instructions from Klaus Schwab as to how to run the world, why on earth would you want to see David Beckham there?
Well, the 49-year-old former footballer has gone, and he was chatting to the TV anchor Sarah Eisen, and this was after accepting an award for his work improving the living conditions for children. And he's told an audience there, and it was televised and you saw it, that he wanted his daughter Harper, who's 13, to have the same life chances as her 3 older brothers. So that's why he. I'm
sure she'll be fine. I don't think we need to worry too much about David Beckham's daughter. One final one, because we're nearly out of time. Page 3 of the Daily Mail. A couple of interesting stories. You've got Adios America. We've got Richard Gere, one of the people who said he was going to move out of America. Happens to have a Spanish girlfriend, so it's easy for him. With Spanish wife, actually, Alejandra Silva. They've relocated to Madrid. But similarly, Spain's socialist prime minister stepped up his war on home buyers from Britain, basically saying he's going to ban people from Britain from ever buying houses in Spain.
Yes, he wants to hammer foreigners with a tax of up to 100% on the value of properties that they buy in Spain. So it's going to become it's practically impossible to buy your retirement home in Spain. And lots of people want to retire, don't they? Lots of listeners will be dreaming. Okay, they could retire in Britain, and they will just look out of the window, and it will be raining.
Nice.
But Spain is hot and sunny, and it's a good place to go. But the Spanish don't like it. I think ultimately the losers are going to be the Spanish, the Spanish economy, because
they need the money.
The money is fantastic. You don't have to pay the care costs. People come in and they spend money and they retire and they enjoy their retirement.
Exactly right. Anyway, listen, Theo, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Lots more to come over the course of the next 3 hours. We're here, of course, until 10 o'clock. We're taking your voice notes, keep taking your messages. This is Morning Glory. We'll be back after the news.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. We are into the second hour of the show. 3 glorious hours still to go of Morning Glory, of course. We've got a new sheriff in town. Yeah, that's right, Donald Trump. He's the man. And he is talking about a great many things over in the course of day 2 in the White House. So far, though, he still hasn't had a conversation with Keir Starmer, as far as we can tell. Keir Starmer, of course, yesterday on this very show at 8:30 yesterday morning, made a rather long and rambling speech about why he knew information about the Southport killer, Rudy Cabana, but he couldn't tell us anything about it because he was worried he might prejudice the trial. Ever since then, all manner of legal scholars, journalists, experts, political commentators have all said he's talking absolute and utter nonsense. It's not true to say that you can't release certain kinds of information about suspects in cases, particularly before they're actually charged. And he could have told us a lot more about the nature of this individual, the picture that was released of the individual that you can now see looking like a deranged, murdering maniac, should have been released many weeks before the picture was released of him looking like an innocent child's choir boy. I mean, it's absolutely utterly ridiculous. The whole case is bringing down this Labour government to a level now which is even lower than they were at last week. You know, Keir Starmer can't seem to get anything right at all. Meanwhile, there's all kinds of rows going on about the expansion of Heathrow Airport. Sadiq Khan is going to get to grips with Rachel Reeves, who's over in Davos today, telling everybody over there exactly how great the British economy is, even though nobody actually agrees with her. We're going to be talking about what's on the front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning. Benefit chicks to be banned from roads. Apparently, people who owe more than £1,000 in wrongly claimed welfare benefits and who have ignored repeated requests to return the money will be punished under the new charges. Also, the Daily Mail has got Rachel Reeves on the day she talks to the people at Davos, hit by the biggest job slump since COVID. It's all going rather badly, isn't it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Coming up in this hour, James Heal joins us, political correspondent from The Spectator. Let's just, before we do that, though, revisit something that happened yesterday for Donald Trump. Donald Trump, of course, having become the 47th president of the United States, he was inaugurated on Monday. It was a fascinating ceremony to watch. It was a fascinating exchange of power, if you like, to watch as Joe Biden sort of passed the baton to him, and suddenly now we're back into a whole new world of Trumpism, right? But something slipped through the net that nobody was expecting, and that was, of course, a rather annoying priest.
In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. Some who fear for their lives.
The Trump assembled there going, what on earth is this woman going on about? Donald Trump has since issued a tweet about this particular priest. The so-called bishop, he says, who spoke at the National Prayer Service on Tuesday morning, was a radical left hardline Trump hater. She brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. She was nasty in tone and not compelling or smart. She failed to mention a large number of illegal migrants that came into our country and killed people. Many were deposited from jails and mental institutions. It is a giant crime wave that is taking place in the USA. Apart from her inappropriate statements, the service was a very boring and uninspiring one. She is not very good at her job. She and her church owe the public an apology. So the late night tweets are back, ladies and gentlemen. We've got plenty of room for Donald Trump's views, and we're going to be very much entertained, I suspect, over the course of the year. Let's talk to James Heal, political correspondent of The Spectator. Just before we do, James, very good morning to you. A bit of breaking news. A boy aged 14 has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a 12-year-old boy died following a stabbing in the Hall Green area of Birmingham yesterday, according to the West Midlands Police. I wonder if Keir Starmer's going to blame Amazon for that one. We'll find out, I dare say. James, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. A little note on Trump, I suppose, before we start on what's going on here in Downing Street. We have yet to see or hear the Trump-Starmer conversation. Many people saying to me that, everything's fine, the relationship's absolutely no problem at all. The fact that, Starmer wasn't invited to the inauguration doesn't matter. But it kind of does, because he's already behind several world leaders who will have had conversations with Trump. There used to be the race to be the first person to talk to the new president. He's already lost that. And who knows how long it's going to be before Trump deigns to have a conversation with him.
Yeah, I mean, the really interesting thing is that most White House, there's not a lot of access, but a lot of influence, i.e. that, you can't really get to them. Once you can get to them, you can influence them. The reverse is true with Trump, which is that there's lots of access, not much influence, in that he tends to reflect the opinion of the last person who spoke to him. So having that regular communication is really important, which is why, obviously, people like Nigel Farage were always very keen to go over there and talk to him. And so I do think that while we've got important strategic interests, it's clear that already I don't think Donald Trump and Keir Starmer are going to be particularly getting on very personally.
No, exactly right. And we see from the Times this morning that, Trump's focus is very much not on the UK necessarily, specifically, but it's very much on foreign companies and foreign countries coming to America and trying to do business there, because it looks as though he's going to bring in all sorts of steep tax rises on foreign nationals working in the US, as well as also companies wishing to set up there. So as much as it might well be a free and open trade zone, it won't be for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is fascinating, is that, one of the few main political principles of Donald Trump's philosophy has been tariffs. It's been something he's talked about for 35 years, something he ran on in the 80s. He has a very zero-sum game of the world. And so, as you say, putting more taxes on foreign staff, putting more taxes effectively on foreign goods, that is going to be a real challenge to kind of the post-1945 world order, which America has done very well out of.
Yeah, of course. And Peter Mandelson's name keeps coming up in the frame. Not very sure whether he's going to be welcomed with open arms by the White House and the new teams in there. And now, suddenly, Ed Miliband's brother, David Miliband, is offering very generously to solve the problem by stepping into the ambassador's shoes himself.
Well, there's that tact and charm which almost won in the Labour leadership. Look, I think that, David Miliband has been spotted a lot around Westminster in recent months. I bumped into him myself, actually.
Have you?
Yeah, walking around. So he's been having lots of meetings. Now, of course, he's the head of International Rescue, not the Thunderbirds theme, but the international aid charity in Washington, which earns a fortune. So I think that he's clearly someone who wants to get more back involved in the kind of US-UK relationship. But I think that it's more likely that Mandelson will get appointed at some point, and that it's certain members, as I say, going back to that first point I made about lots of Trump people say they speak for him, say they'll do this and that. I think it's more likely than not that Mandelson will be appointed as ambassador.
Yeah, well, let's wait and see. Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves is in Davos. Been there since, I think, Sunday night, Monday morning. She's speaking today, I think, alongside Jonathan Ashworth at this, bun fest, I suppose you might call it, where very, very wealthy people get together to do a bit of snowboarding, drinking, and occasional conversation about how the world should be run. She's going to be very, very hard-pressed, is she not, to make Britain out to be a great place to come to invest in, because according to the Mail this morning, she's got the biggest job slump on her hands since COVID. Fresh alarms over the faltering economy, warnings from investors of a death spiral of debt. And the economy really is in a pretty bad way, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that certainly Labour have accelerated an existing process. They came into office, they were pretty downbeat about the economy. They will obviously put up national insurance, and these things have consequences. And I think the danger is there's a perception in Westminster and some elements of the city, I think, that they just simply see the private sector as a kind of cash cow to milk it. And actually that's not the case. And growth is a very difficult thing to, lots of different things to make it right. And so going to Davos actually, in some ways, I think shows a bit being behind the times. I mean, no one's really going to Davos from the look of things. It seems to be very much a yesteryear zeitgeist rather than...
I mean, I said this yesterday. When you see David Beckham turning up at Davos, you kind of go, well, maybe it's not all that it was formerly cracked up to be when it used to be the place where world leaders went. I mean, Donald Trump's not there. Starmer's not there. I don't know how many... the Russians stopped going a few years ago because of the Ukraine war. The Arab world kind of still occasionally goes there because they quite like a bit of, Switzerland in the wintertime and a bit of snow. But it's really not as influential as it used to be, is it?
No, and I think also you've got to remember that, conferences is one thing, making consultations is another. It's actually taking decisions that's what's defined to you at the Treasury. And so, for instance, the reports yesterday that she might be approving Heathrow expansion, I think that would matter a lot more to the money men in the city than turning up for 3 days, as you say, having a bit of wine, going on slopes and sitting to another empty, soulless room in Davos.
Yeah, quite. And let's talk a bit about Keir Starmer's position as well, because he came out yesterday sort of all guns blazing, if you like, talking about how it was awful that there's terrible things that you can see online, and he's going to crack down on lone wolf terrorism because he's apparently only discovered that it's a new thing that's been going on for several years. He's blaming all sorts of internet sites for the Raducanu Southport rampage, and basically talking about kind of clamping down on the tech moguls of this world. But he seems to have got it completely wrong again, because all the journalists who were at the press conference yesterday and many sort of legal brains afterwards have said, you know, this nonsense that he's talking about, you know, exactly what you can say and what you can't say when somebody is arrested for a crime. He's managed to get that completely mangled, hasn't he?
I think that one of the big frustrations about Keir Starmer is he often treats it like a civil service, and he says, these are the arguments, and sets them out. The point is that you have to make a judgment call on probability of risk and the balance of risk. And of course, there is the risk of contempt of court. That has to be weighed, of course, about the information being released in a timely and transparent manner. And I think the frustration, and not just about this case, but other ones, is that there's a perception among journalists that police forces across the country have got much slower in recent years at releasing information. Yes. They hide behind process, they're unwilling to answer questions, and that, frankly, you know, you may like it or not, but in an age now of digital media, there is a vacuum and that gets filled. And I do hope that this encourages a reconsideration about how that information is being put out.
And how
because,
it's
frankly,
done, But I mean, the Telegraph, you've got Merseyside detectives saying they wanted to provide details about the killer's background, Rudy Cabana, but in fact, they wanted to include his religion, his crimes, but they were warned not to do so by the Crown Prosecution Service.
I mean, this other thing is that, are we saying now that there can't be any information released between when the incident happens and then obviously when they're charged? Well, I understand that, but that could be many months in some cases, and I do think that there needs to be a discussion around the balance between you know, disclosure information and, as you say, no one wants to prejudice trial, but equally, like, how likely is that going to be? And I suppose that's the risk in all. There's risk in everything.
Well, there is, but you know, there was a time when, you know, from the arrest until the charge, you could say pretty much anything you wanted. You know, and that's kind of been worn away over time by what I would call cautious lawyers who have kind of said, oh, we don't want to blame somebody for saying the wrong thing and getting somebody a mistrial. But that's never been the case. You know, once the charge comes in, that's when the case becomes sub judice, and that's when newspapers and everybody else have to be very careful what they say. But until the moment the charge comes, it's not an active case.
Absolutely, and I think that you've got to remember that initially, of course, there was all this misinformation online about him being an asylum seeker or whatever. And I just think it's in everyone's interest that we just get the information out there as quickly as possible. And then people have to act responsibly.
Well, surely what they should have then done, the government and the Crown Prosecution Service and the police, they should have come out and said, look, he's not an asylum seeker, he's not somebody who's come over on a small boat, he's not a Muslim, and this is who he is, and this is what we know about him. We know that he was involved with Prevent, we know that he's had previous problems with violent thoughts and blah, blah, blah. You know, just give us the information. That would have killed it stone dead.
I think there's a very good case for that, and you know, all I can say is that I hope that in future ones we do kind of consider that, because you know, we're not in an analog age anymore, in the digital age, and you know, people have a real desire to know about these things, and I think some people acted irresponsibly, clearly, but also, you know, I think it should prompt some reflection at the highest levels about open and timely. I think that's timely disclosure information.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. James, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. James Heal, political correspondent at The Spectator, of course. Brendan in London says, morning, Mike. Regarding the Southport terrorist, I think the reason they announced him as a Welsh choir boy is because the word choir immediately resonates with the word Christian, therefore taking the Islam aspect out of his heinous crime. I think you're probably right. You know, there's no question that there was a deliberate message that's probably being given out by the police, the Merseyside police in Southport, which was that, you know, there's nothing to see here. It's a lone wolf. It's a guy who's got nothing to do with terrorism. It's a guy who's, you know, and that clearly came from on high. We've got, as I say, the story in the Telegraph today, police saying that they were basically silenced and told not to say things about his religion or indeed his background by the Crown Prosecution Service, who presumably would have been instructed to do that by the Attorney General, who's also under fire, and probably by the government as well. Merseyside police claim the CPS gagged them, says Tony, from revealing information prior to charges being laid down. It took days to charge the Southport terrorist. It is legal to report on a suspect until they are charged. That's absolutely right. We'll be talking coming up a little bit later on in this hour to Lord Alex Carlisle of Berriew, who is, of course, the former 2011 Prevent Strategy reviewer. He will have plenty to say about the Prevent situation and how that managed to fail in this case, but also he'll have something to say, I imagine, as well, about the legal ramifications of what you can say before somebody is actually charged. Here's one from Keith in Lincolnshire. He says, Mike, great common sense show. How could Starmer stand there and say we must protect our citizens and our children from terrorists when he freely lets in hundreds of unknown, unvetted people into our country every single day? Well, that's a very good question, and quite rightly, you're asking it. Again, if I could get Keir Starmer into this studio to sit down in front of me and answer a whole series of questions, I would get answers to all of these. But he's never going to do it, is he? Why not? He's the Prime Minister of this country. I think he owes it to the people of this country, represented by me, to try and get a conversation going about what it is that people in this country care about. He clearly doesn't know. I'd be more than happy to educate him. So here's a message to all of you bozos in Downing Street. If you don't think it's a good idea to put people on my show because you don't like the questions that I ask, well, you are doing a great disservice to the people of this country, because they deserve, at least, to be treated with respect, I think. It's 7:18. I'm Mike Graham.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:21. Morning, Mike, says down in Cardiff. Talking of Ed Millipede, my oddball neighbour is having a heat pump fitted. I thought the fitters would come in and do it in a day, like they can with a gas boiler, but oh no. So far, 5 vans a day have turned up, have done for the past 7 days, 7 weekdays, several blokes inside and outside the house, and they're not done yet. I asked how much he paid. He said it was only 500 quid. Brilliant, isn't it? You and I are contributing to that. Absolute madness. Well, I mean, my understanding is that putting in a heat pump costs around about £10,000, £5,000 of which will be given to you by the government. The other £5,000 you have to find. So if he's managed to get it done for 500 quid, then he's obviously getting even bigger help from somebody or other, possibly a grant from somewhere. Who can say? Bit of breaking news, by the way, in case you're wondering how things are going in the economy, as Rachel Reeves prepares to speak to the powers that be at Davos. Treasury borrowing has already shot past official forecast made in the budget in a blow to Rachel Reeves' plans to ramp up spending. This is just broken in the last few minutes. Britain has already borrowed £4.1 billion more so far this financial year than was projected, according to the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR. It comes after the Treasury borrowed, wait for it, just last month, 17.8 billion quid. What are they doing with it? Are they just burning it in the back of Downing Street? You just chuck it into an incinerator in the garden. The rise in debt is unwelcome for the Chancellor because it means that she may not meet her fiscal rules, which is something we warned about last week. Of course, the Treasury denied that was going to happen. What the hell are they doing with the money? £17.8 billion they borrowed. I mean, I can't even imagine what you could do with that money. For heaven's sake. I mean, you could pay for all of Keir Starmer's flights around the world, as he's been travelling so much since the July the 4th victory. Donald Trump has put Winston Churchill's bust back in the White House, says Margaret. He loves the UK, and we love him. 4 years of this fantastic president, says Margaret in Birmingham. We're looking forward to it. Let's talk to Matthew Bryser, former US ambassador, who joins us to talk about day 2, I suppose you might call it, Matthew, of the Trump presidency. I mean, it's been quite a week, hasn't it? Monday's inauguration was quite a stellar occasion. The glamour was kind of reinserted back into Washington, D.C. You know, the bluster, the kind of the confidence, and just the brazen kind of, you know, we're in charge type mentality seems to have come back. You know, after 4 years of Joe Biden, which was pretty painful to watch at times, I find it all rather refreshing.
Yeah, Mike, it's quite a change, and Donald Trump really signaled in his inauguration address that he was taking control. He was highly critical of everything the Biden administration did. Essentially, he said this Biden administration couldn't manage a single crisis at home, not to mention stumbling into a range of international conflicts. And so, you know, Trump got right to work with signing a few hundred executive decisions that reversed like 80 or so of the ones that Biden had implemented.
Yeah, he's really been very busy. Here he is announcing $1 trillion investment on his first day in the Oval Office.
In total, before the end of my first full business day in Washington in the White House, we've already secured nearly $3 trillion of new investments in the United States, and probably that's going to be 6 or 7 by the end of the week. Tremendous amounts of money are coming in for many things other than even AI. AI seems to be very hot. It seems to be the thing that a lot of smart people are looking at very strongly. And our country will be prospering like never before. I think that's true, and it's going to be the golden age of America.
The golden age, and that's kind of sticking, isn't it? Because it's a great phrase, the golden age of America, and he is managing to pull in an incredible amount of money. I mean, the business leaders of the US and around the world, seemingly, are certainly buying into it, aren't they?
They sure are. You know, the tech community, the so-called tech bros in Silicon Valley, were ones that were once quite critical of Donald Trump. But there they were, all sitting up, not only in the Capitol Rotunda for his inauguration, but they were up in the privileged area, you know, with family, the first family. So, yeah, the world has seen, whether it be the United States tech community or global investors, they have seen that whether or not they like Donald Trump himself, whether or not they're worried about some of his proposed policies internationally, like, you know, taking Greenland, they know which way the wind is blowing, and they want to be on the winning side.
Yeah, right. And even in Greenland, they're saying that we're willing to talk to President Trump about the possibility of whatever it is he might want to do. It might be that they don't want to hand over power and sovereignty to him, but you know, he makes people sit up and take notice.
He really does. He has this amazing ability to say something that seems outrageous and completely unacceptable. And then when you think about it, like, maybe it's not. Just like you said, Mike, in Greenland, the Greenlanders, they want independence, it looks like, from Denmark. They don't necessarily want dependence on the U.S., but they want something new. And if Donald Trump can provide that, they're willing to give it a listen.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of policy issues where Trump changes the terms of the debate.
He does, and he has no fear, does he? I mean, we've obviously got a relatively new government in this country, and they're doing things, but they're doing things which they didn't say they were going to do, which means the people are not happy about that. Whereas Trump's doing all the things that basically people voted him in to do.
It's true. It's true. And there are some cases people would say, well, he's gone beyond what he said he was going to do, but he mentioned that he would do some of these things. What do I mean? He said he was going to pardon the people who were arrested, convicted, and then now in prison for the January 6th riot on Capitol Hill. Well, he issued the pardon for them yesterday, but he issued them also for violent participants in the event. And previously he said he wouldn't, so he went even further. So yeah, people voted for those pardons, but then he pulled the debate even further to pardon those who used violence against police officers, which has sparked a whole new debate overnight.
Yes, I've seen some of that, because some of the guys that were coming out yesterday were imprisoned for sort of, you know, punching police officers, for tasering them and all sorts of stuff. Let's have a listen to what he says about Biden's pardons as well, because I think a lot of people on this side of the pond are really struggling with this whole idea of pardoning people who haven't done anything, supposedly.
Joe Biden gave a pardon yesterday to a lot of criminals. These are criminals that he gave a pardon to. And you should be asking that question. Why did he give a pardon to all of these people that committed crimes?
Well, also, why did he give a pardon to a load of people in his family who didn't commit any crimes? Which is, I mean, it's a kind of front-loaded, just in case you decide to charge me with something, I'm going to be able to hold up this card that says I've got immunity.
Yeah, Mike, and I think it goes even further and is worse. Number one, it just suggests that maybe these family members do have something to worry about in terms of having done something that reflects Trump's allegations that they're corrupt. Secondly, it reinforces Trump's view that the justice system had been politically weaponized, in his case, against him, because, again, they're using the political system here in the case of Biden to protect his family. There are a lot of Democrats who are deeply upset by these pardons by President Biden. Right.
And while, you know, I'm saying that we're all very enthralled and entertained by the golden age of America and all of that, you know, what are the sort of the anti-Trump brigade going to be up to? Because we saw already the guy who's been charged with sorting out the border, talking about people who are going to complain about the kind of activities they're going to be getting up to, the mass deportations that people are going to object to, you know, the states where they're not going to help out federal officers if they come and try and, you know, empty a restaurant full of illegal workers, that kind of thing. Is there going to be, can you say, a sort of organised opposition to whatever Trump wants to do?
Well, there will be opposition, as you described, and there could be physical clashes. But in terms of organized, it doesn't seem like it at the moment. The Democrats are in total disarray. They don't even know who's going to be the leader of their party, because Kamala Harris, right, she didn't succeed in the election. Right. And so there are different voices, and I think a lot of fear about what this means. I mean, a lot of Democrats that I know are saying, I got to get my passport in order to leave the country now and go to Canada or something, which made Trump says be the 51st state, although he's joking, I think, on that. So I don't sense that the Democrats have a concept strategically now to get reorganized. But as we said, there will be resistance when people are getting rounded up, and there could be clashes with police.
Yeah, well, we'll wait and see. Matthew Bryson, thank you very much indeed, former US ambassador, talking about the Trump golden era, which is what it's now being called. He's getting on with an awful lot of work, it has to be said. We're going to come back to the UK with our next guest. It's Lord Alex Carlisle. He's going to talk to us about Prevent and about the Radicubana case, of course, in Southport. How it is that Prevent could have got it so wrong, how it is that Keir Starmer can get away with saying that he didn't give out information that could have been crucial to the public good, because he thought he was protecting the trial and protecting the sanctity of the legal process. I think he was wrong, so do an awful lot of other people. 7:31.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:34. I'm Mike Graham. The front page is all still very much covered with this story from Southport and Keir Starmer's statement yesterday. Police claim they were gagged over Southport terrorist, is what it says on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Front page of The Sun, which carries an article by Keir Starmer, says the Amazon killer. Southport murderer Axel Ruda-Cabana was able to buy knives on Amazon in seconds, despite being just 17, with a history of violence. What came out, of course, in the trial after he pleaded guilty was that he had been referred 3 separate times to Prevent, the organisation which is supposed to spot people being radicalised and being possibly trained to become terrorists. The headline inside on the Keir Starmer piece says, "Terrorism has changed. We must guard against loners and misfits who threaten us, and I will root them out." A lot of people being very critical of Keir Starmer this morning. We're going to speak shortly to Lord Alex Carlisle of Bury You, former independent reviewer of terrorism legislation and the former independent review of the government's 2011 Prevent strategy. Before we do that, though, let's have a listen to Harry Cole from The Sun, political editor yesterday in Downing Street, asking Keir Starmer about what he knew and when he knew it.
Harry from The Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Sorry to labour this point, but I think it's important. All summer we were repeatedly told that the Stockport attack was not terror-related, wasn't being treated as terror-related. That wasn't true. Because in October, this monster was charged with a terror offence. Now, information was put into the public domain then that didn't collapse the trial. It didn't jeopardise justice. It was just months later. Now, you say you knew about the ricin and the Al-Qaeda bomb manual and it was known to the authorities. Did you know about that personally at the same time the public, the press, and you and the police were saying this is not terror-related? Because I think that's the nub of the issue and that's what's upset people. You say you couldn't speak out publicly, that you couldn't do that, but didn't the public have a right to know, not least the neighbours who had ricin being produced on their street? Surely they had a right to know.
Well, I think there are 2 separate and important issues there, Harry. The first is on the question of terrorism and what constitutes terrorism. Yes, of course I was kept up to date with the facts as they were emerging. That is usual practice. But just like you, as a journalist, I had to observe the law of the land. It was not my personal decision to withhold this information, any more than it was a journalist's personal decision not to print or write about it. That is the law of the land that is in place for the reasons I've set out, to protect the integrity of the system, to ensure that the victims and their families get the justice that they deserve. Thank you, Harry.
Interesting answer to a very interesting question by Harry Cole, not quite answering it in the way that I think he should have done. Let's talk to Lord Alex Carlisle to get his view. Lord Alex, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I think, and please correct me if you think I'm wrong here, I think that Keir Starmer's being slightly kind of economical with the truth on this one, isn't he? Because he's making out that basically when somebody has committed a crime or somebody's been arrested for a crime, that one, that case immediately becomes active, and two, you risk a contempt of court for a trial that hasn't even yet been announced because there's been no actual charge. And so when Keir Starmer says that he was abiding by the letter of the law, he's not quite telling the truth there, is he?
He's telling the truth, and you are wrong. The law is absolutely clear. When an investigation starts and there's a clear risk of a charge taking place from the very beginning, the police had their perpetrator and he was plainly going to be prosecuted, then the fair trial provisions come into play. And we don't have two standards of fair trial, one for criminals who we don't particularly like and another one for criminals who we really hate. There's one fair trial provision, and it works like this as a matter of law. I'm simply going to explain to you what Mr. Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer, said yesterday. If bad character evidence is to be given in a trial, as would have happened here if it had been a full trial and nobody knew that he was going to plead guilty until he actually pled guilty, then a judge has to hear a written application and an oral application to admit such evidence. And some of it may be admitted and some of it may not be admitted. And if the government or the police or retired police officers or journalists take it on themselves to subvert a trial by declaring material that is known to them that might not be given to the jury in that trial, then it risks the trial being totally wrecked. And Keir Starmer was absolutely right to describe the law in the expert way he did.
Well, I disagree with you, and you've said that I'm wrong, but I was
tell me the law that says you're right and I'm wrong.
I will tell you how the law changes in my view. And
no,
what
you tell me what law, the bit of law that says you are right and I'm wrong.
When there is no court case, right, when someone has been arrested, there is a difference between an arrest and a charge. You would agree with that, I would assume. When somebody is charged, you're absolutely right, there is nothing that you can then say which might affect the court case. What you and Keir Starmer are saying...
perfectly well.
Well, you can let me finish.
No, you can't. Let me finish. You're not permitted to make this up.
I'm permitted to not... I'm permitted... Excuse me. I'm permitted to make an argument to you. If you don't want to listen to it, then that's your problem, right?
You're permitted to ask me questions, and I'm permitted to answer them.
You've asked me a question. You haven't let me answer it, right? So if you would give me the privilege of doing so. Are you telling me that there's no difference between somebody being arrested in law and somebody being charged? Are you saying that the restrictions are the same? Because I don't think they are.
No, you're asking the wrong question. I'm telling you.
Can't just answer the question.
Are you going to allow me to answer?
No, I've asked you a question. I want you to answer it. Are there differences? Are there differences between being arrested and being charged? Yes or no?
There are differences.
Thank you.
But hang on. But in this case, nothing could have been done and said about Ricin because by that time he'd already been charged. Full stop.
But except it was said. No, well, it was said, though, before the case came up, wasn't it?
No, it was not said before the case came up. It was said after he pleaded guilty in court.
No, he didn't plead guilty in court. He didn't make a plea the first time he appeared in court at all, actually.
And
he pleaded guilty. No, he pleaded guilty this week. Didn't he?
The material about Ricin... Can I answer your question?
Ask me a question.
The material about Ricin and what he was looking at on the internet was revealed after he had pleaded guilty.
Last year. It was revealed after a plea was entered for him. He did not enter a plea of guilty until this week.
Well, I disagree with you. I disagree with you on the facts.
You can't disagree on facts.
Right.
You can't disagree on facts, Lord Alex, I'm afraid. But I'll tell you what we can agree on. Prevent, which you were a reviewer of in 2011, and their strategy, Prevent have created a massive problem here because they didn't do their job. Let's talk about that.
Which problem are you talking about?
Well, the fact that he was referred to them 3 times and Prevent decided that he was not a risk to the public.
Well, it depends on the information that was given to Prevent. Well, I mean, you're missing...
Well, I'm sorry, you're drawing sort of conclusions before you've actually talked about the evidence. You have decided that Keir Starmer's done a great job here. I disagree with you, and so does most of the country.
If you'd allow me, I was going to make a point that is very important in this situation, which is that I don't know what Prevent were told because I was not there, but before Prevent were approached, an awful lot of other people knew about this perpetrator, including mental health services, the 3 or 4 schools from which he was excluded, his doctors, the social services, the police. Did they share the information in a way that presented a convincing case to Prevent that he should be taken into the Prevent strand of counter-terrorism policy? Also, you have to remember that Prevent is a scheme that depends on cooperation. And I find it very difficult to believe that this perpetrator would have cooperated with Prevent. That may be the reason why he was not admitted to the Prevent programme, which is very successful with many people, but not all.
Well, I would have to say that I would disagree with you on that as well, because Prevent is clearly not fit for purpose. Would you not agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that at all.
What exactly has been good that Prevent has done?
Prevent has done what it says in the on the tin.
Well, it hasn't prevented anything, has it? It hasn't prevented young children being killed. No, it hasn't prevented young children from being killed. It hasn't prevented the London Bridge attacker from killing people when he came to Fisherman's Hall. You know, it has failed multiple times to protect the British public. So therefore, the word prevent is not even a suitable moniker for the organisation.
Can I now answer your question?
Please do.
Or whichever question you want me to answer.
Well, you tell me what successes Prevent has provided.
I was about to, but you interrupted me during my
well, I'm sorry. You're obviously not used to robust conversations, are you? Well, yeah, because I'm not going to be spoken down to like some kind of child. Okay, I don't know who you think you are. Just because you're a lord does not give you the ability to lord it over the rest of the public. Okay, so talk to me as an equal, or else you can get lost. Frankly,
I thought you were a journalist.
No, I am a journalist. Yes, I am.
I'm going to answer your question if you'll shut up for a minute.
Go ahead.
Right. Prevent has done a great deal of good. Prevent has prevented large numbers of people from becoming terrorists, but it does not succeed in every case, and you could not expect it to succeed in every case. I could give you examples, if they were not covered by confidentiality, of course, of people who have been helped by Prevent to set aside the radicalization that had occurred to them and lead good lives. Some of them may even have become journalists. I know some of them have become involved in countering terrorism. So Prevent, though not perfect, has worked for many people. When I asked people who were doing Prevent schemes from the Muslim community in one of our main cities what they thought about Prevent, they said to me, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It prevents people from being terrorists. That's the answer to your question.
It didn't prevent this guy from being a terrorist, did it?
No, it doesn't prevent everyone. No system succeeds 100%. The police arrest a lot of people who are never prosecuted, and journalists ask a lot of silly questions. But it
I'm
does
so sorry
work.
to have been a nuisance.
Answer to your question.
I'm so sorry to have been a nuisance, Lord Alex Carlisle. Thank you very much for not being very helpful at all. You stick in your lane. You'll never be able to be persuaded that you're wrong, and that's part of the problem with the judicial system in this country. Thank you very much indeed. Let me talk to Richard Tice, who's here, having witnessed that rather ridiculous conversation with a man who doesn't appear to want to vary from his view that Prevent is a great organisation, does a fantastic job, and Keir Starmer's brilliant. I mean,
well, good morning.
You know, 0 out of 10, I think. Sorry.
I can't agree with almost anything that Lord Carlisle... I mean, it's probably true that Prevent has prevented some people, but the reason that William Shawcross carried out an independent review of Prevent was because it was failing.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason for the review.
Of course.
And he found that actually it was failing to identify terrorist sympathisers, and there was an increased risk in the UK.
Yeah.
And that was the whole point of it.
We've also learned anecdotally over the last few days, talking to people who are in the business of having children in schools or having children who are referred to Prevent, and the obsession that Prevent seems to have at the moment is to refer many more supposedly right-wing extremist children than anything else.
Fundamentally, how can an organisation like Prevent claim to do any good at all when it has 3 referrals from an individual who turned out to be one of the greatest monsters this country has ever seen? It had plenty of evidence, and instead it considered nothing to see here, gov. So, I mean, what I want to know actually is who's going to resign, who's going to be fired, who's going to pay the price for those 3 children that are dead.
Exactly.
That's what I want to know.
Exactly.
And it is quite clear from the establishment and what you've just heard there that there is no willingness to accept that establishment entities have got things wrong. And I'm afraid I agree with you, and I think Lord Carlisle was completely wrong about the difference between being arrested and being charged.
He was.
We have multiple previous examples, and I shall just go through a few of them.
Go on.
In 2016, when Joe Cox MP was murdered by Thomas Mayer, it was declared a terrorist incident within 24 hours, and information was put out there about the background of Thomas Mayer. In 2017, when Keith Palmer was murdered by Khalid Masood, he was declared a terrorist incident within a day. And we knew who Khalid Masood was. In August 18, car attack outside Westminster. Luckily, no one killed. Salih Qatar was arrested immediately charged with a terror incident before they'd even looked into his background.
Yeah.
Okay? So I'm just not accepting any of this claptrap that this is not terrorist attack. And what they are deliberately doing, the establishment, is they are reliant on the word ideological. Let me suggest to you that if you are downloading and reading an Al-Qaeda training manual, how to kill people, how to carry out terrorist acts, maybe you have got a political or an ideological aim. So they've made a judgment here that is utterly flawed and has resulted in terms of the prevent failures, has resulted in people, children dying. And other children, we should not forget, being horrifically maimed and scarred. And
with life-changing injuries.
And there's another, I mean, I could go on. I've got a list of examples.
We'll come back to that because we're going to take a little break. But I would also say to you that Lord Alex Carlisle, who I consider to now be a complete and utter disgrace by the way that he spoke to me and the way that he literally disavowed the horrible crime that this man committed. He said he didn't know exactly what Prevent had been told. Well, we know what Prevent had been told. We know that they were told that he had been threatening people with a knife, that he had to be restrained in class, that he was looking at terrorist material, that he was studying terrorist attacks that had been looked at online, and all the rest of it.
And Lord Carlisle was completely wrong about the timing of the guilty plea by Rida Kobane, which was only this week.
Only this week, as
and
I
yet
said.
The Ricin and the Al-Qaeda training manual information came out on October the 29th last year.
Yeah, exactly what I said.
Extraordinary lack of understanding and information regarding the case.
Is it any wonder that these systems, these judicial systems, don't work when you've got bozos like him running them? We'll come back to him. I'm not finished with him yet. It's 10 minutes to 8. Richard Tice is here from Reform. We'll carry on. And we want to hear from you on this one as well. 0344 499 1000. Is it any wonder we are in such a state in this country when the powers that be think that they're better than everybody else and nobody should ever question them? How impertinent. Journalists ask a lot of stupid questions, he said. Yeah, well, who gave you your bloody peerage? That's my first question to you, matey. This is Talk.
Telling us the truth about who that person was would not have in any way influenced or changed a trial that might happen. And even today, the Prime Minister couldn't come clean. He continued with the insistence that we deserve to know nothing. He couldn't even himself say it was a terror attack. Well, let's have a think about this, shall we? Al-Qaeda training manuals, chemical weapons. I mean, what more do you need?
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:53. I'm Mike Graham. He was Lord Alex Carlisle. I don't think I've ever had such a ridiculously rude guest. Richard Tice is here with some more information.
Yeah, I have actually, because, well, first of all, Lord Carlisle was removed from the independent review of Prevent back in 2019 because of concerns over his impartiality. Oh, yeah. Interestingly, he does rather seem to have changed his tune.
Does he?
Since last September, when he said, I think we should get out more information if we possibly can. And actually, we've learned from these events, when someone is arrested, the police probably need to tell the media who's been arrested and what their background is. So perhaps Lord Carlisle should come back on the programme and explain why he's changed his tune so significantly over the last 3 months, or has he been got at by the establishment and the likes of Number 10?
Given the
That's
praise,
the question
that's
he needs
a very
to answer.
good question, and given the praise that he heaped on Keir Starmer, telling us what a great job he did yesterday in explaining the law, I suspect he has been got at. How about this from Jenny, who sent this in on Twitter? Let's not forget the atmosphere at the time. People were already incensed and spooked by the Manchester airport assault on the policemen and women a week earlier. It was clear that truth was being managed. Add to that the difference in policing regarding the Leeds riots and those protesting the abhorrence of the killings. We had a new government and Starmer, and it wasn't looking good for free speech. And all of that feeds in, again, to the misinformation campaigns, the fact that, you guys have fought long and hard to finally get a charge on the Manchester airport people. And guess what, Lord Carlisle? Because they've been charged, we won't be talking about that. He at least admitted that there is a difference between being arrested and being charged, because legally that is the crux of the matter, isn't it? Surely.
It is, and I asked the Prime Minister in the PMQs back on October the 30th, the day after the Rice-In and our training information came out. I said, did the Prime Minister agree with his own independent terrorism legislation reviewer, Jonathan Hall Casey, who said we needed to get more information out earlier to prevent the information vacuum? And I would suggest, and I think many people now recognise, that actually, if more information had been put out immediately, as has previously been the case, then I think there would have been less of a feeling that we were being treated like fools. Yes. We were being treated like idiots. Yeah. And I think that led to a sense of anger. No one's excusing the appalling riots, but it fuelled that refusal to give information, fuelled a sense of cover-up. Yeah. And what we've seen is actually information was cover-up, and I think that the establishment class have essentially, through politically correct reasons, decided that we're not entitled to this information.
Yeah, because we're too stupid to know what to do.
Well,
with it.
I'm afraid I think there's an element of that, and no one wants to talk about the elephant in the room. Would they have taken the same approach if it was someone else, if it wasn't someone from an ethnic minority or from his background? That is the question. I don't know, but I just think there is a serious element of political correctness.
There's no question
that has backfired very badly on everybody.
And yesterday's speech by Starmer did not actually clarify things. It actually made them worse, because it seems to me that he is covering his backside. It seems to me that he's saying the things that he's saying in order to try and make out that there was no cover-up, but he's practically admitting it. I mean, even in the Telegraph today, we've got Merseyside detectives saying they wanted to provide more details about the killer's background, including his religion and his crimes, but they were warned not to do so by the Crown Prosecution Service.
In which case, frankly, I mean, this becomes ever more shocking. Yeah. And people at the CPS, the Director of Public Prosecutions, no doubt another of Starmer's mates, has got serious questions to answer.
Totally.
Because if he forced the police, against their better judgment, not to give out information that may have prevented the fuelling of unrest, which in itself was inexcusable, then what they've got to accept is, OK, you made a judgment, you got it badly wrong. Yeah. You've got to have the courage to admit so and say, we've got to change the way we do things, which is why I asked the Home Secretary in the Commons yesterday. I said, there is clearly a conflict at the moment between the need from the desire from the public and the independent review of legislation to get more information out there, and this fear that it might prejudice a trial. Well, in which case, we've basically got to change the rules on that point. Exactly. It's incumbent on those in the House of Commons and the government urgently to, I think, just do it through guidance, not through legislation, because otherwise we're going to continue in this terrible pickle, in a spiral of a loss of confidence,
and
which
also,
is bad for everybody.
And what the government will do is they will attempt to then censor all manner of things on the basis that it will prejudice a trial. And I'm not having that, because we've got very fair and straight rules in this country about what indeed prejudices a trial. And if there is no trial because somebody hasn't been charged yet, then how can you prejudice it? You know, that's the whole point of the law.
I think what we need to do is to look at international comparisons. How do other countries do it? Because we're clearly not getting it right here, and we have to have the humility to recognise that maybe just occasionally other countries are a bit smarter than us and do these things better. And so, you know, we've got to look into that, because it's not working. You're ending up in this terrible pickle where, in a sense, this lack of information is fueling deep concerns about what's being covered up. And, you know, frankly, we've got to get the information out.
We've got to get it out there, because the people lack trust in the system. They don't think the system works, and they're absolutely right.
And they used to get this information out.
And they absolutely did. You know, I've been doing this job a long time. Lord Carlisle's a plank. Richard Tice, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you soon. This is Morning Glory. More after the news.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 8. Well, that was a fairly robust last half hour, wasn't it? We had Lord Alex Carlisle, who's been back in touch with us, saying that he never wants to be asked on the show again. Well, the feeling's entirely mutual, mate. Let's not forget that Richard Tice managed to discover that only in September Lord Alex Carlisle was actually saying that we should, in fact, get more information out there in order to give the police help and in order to give the public more information so that they can trust the system. Because at the moment, the public does not trust the system. Keir Starmer yesterday got up up in Downing Street and attempted to explain away the reasons why he didn't give out the information that he had at the time, because he was worried about prejudicing a trial. I can tell you from my knowledge, of my intimate knowledge, I would say, of the law, when it comes to prejudicing trials, when it comes to charges, when it comes to people being arrested, that Starmer got it wrong, and we've got plenty of reasons and plenty of people who will be coming on this show later on to tell us why he is in fact wrong, and we are right, because it's ridiculous to make out that just because somebody gets arrested that you then can't say anything about their background, that you then can't say anything about their religion, about their identity. Absolute and utter cobblers. Completely wrong, because there was never, ever contempt of court when there has been no court case. It's not true. We're going to talk to Dan Hodges coming up, commentator from the Mail on Sunday. A couple of bits of breaking news. The debt spiral gets worse in this country. Rachel Reeves is about to speak to the burghers of Davos. She's over there with Jonathan Ashworth, and she's going to be talking about how Britain should be a great place to come and invest money. But I'm afraid the debt now has overshot the fiscal rules that she has now broken. UK debt is higher than it's ever been. Also, a bit of breaking news. A boy aged 14 has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a 12-year-old boy died following a stabbing in the Hall Green area of Birmingham yesterday. That's from the West Midlands Police. I don't know whether Keir Starmer's going to blame that on Amazon, which is what he's doing in The Sun this morning, saying basically the trouble is that the Southport murderer, Axel Rudikubana, was able to get himself a knife on Amazon. Well, let me tell you something. The number of knife crimes in this country is soaring, but the by far most likely use of a knife is a kitchen knife. Not a zombie knife, not something you buy on Amazon, not a Rambo knife, but actually a kitchen knife that you've taken out of your mum's drawer. That seems to be the way that most people commit crimes in this day and age. We'll also talk about Donald Trump in this hour as well. He is, of course, launching himself for the second day purely as president, 47th president of the United States of America. Still no conversation yet with Keir Starmer. We assume he'll have one soon, but we'll wait and see. 0344 499 1000 is the number. There's a row also going on inside the Labour Party about Heathrow Airport. Rachel Reeves wants a runway, a third runway. Sadiq Khan says he doesn't. And Ed Miliband is up in arms. I can't even say the word. Absolutely ridiculously unhappy about it. Anyway, this is Morning Glory. It's 5 minutes past 8. Let us get it on. There's a big storm brewing as well, by the way. Storm Eowyn. E-O-W-Y-N. Sounds Welsh to me. It's apparently going to hit the entire country on Friday. 60-mile-an-hour winds, 70-mile-an-hour winds, so it's going to be a bit nasty out there. So we'll come back to that coming up later on in the show. Let's say a very good morning, though, to Dan Hodges. Dan, nice to see you. How are you doing?
Morning. Yeah, good.
I don't know whether you witnessed my encounter with my Lord Carlisle. He was a very interesting character. Last September, he said that he thought there should be more information being put out there in the public domain. He is, of course, a former Prevent strategy reviewer. He was removed from that, apparently, in 2019 because he was thought not to be independent enough. He now seems to have changed his tune. He now says Keir Starmer was completely right. So we had a bit of a disagreement, and there we are. And I know you think that Keir Starmer was right to say what he said, but I think he's being slightly economical with the truth, because you know, and I do, certainly in my career as a journalist, there's a big difference, and even Lord Carlisle admitted this, between being arrested and being charged. When you're charged, absolutely, the curtains come down, sub judice, you can't talk about a court case. But when there isn't a court case and somebody's been arrested, you can.
Yes, but the point is, what I'm also aware of is, and I'm sure you're aware as well, you know, obviously we were involved in this case very closely as journalists. It's something I was looking at very closely. And I know, as I'm sure you do, that there was a lot of information about the case that we would like to have published, that we were advised, and this was independent legal advice, this wasn't government lawyers, we were advised that we couldn't because it could potentially prejudice the trial. And I mean, you know...
Yeah, but I think that advice is wrong. That's what I'm saying.
Well, Mike, you may think that, and some people do. But you have to look at this from the perspective of Keir Starmer. As you've said, you're going to get people on the programme, I'm sure eminent lawyers, saying, no, it would have been safe to publish the information. You've just, as you've said, you had Lord Carlisle on, I don't know whether he's changed his position, but is saying, no, that could have potentially prejudiced the trial. There were a lot of lawyers out. There was a big debate about this yesterday on both sides. So you're Keir Starmer, you've got one of the worst atrocities in this country's history. You have some lawyers saying, Prime Minister, don't worry, you can publish the information, it won't prejudice the trial. You then have another group of lawyers saying, no, Prime Minister, if you do it, potentially could. But here's the kicker, here's the crucial thing, and the head of the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, who were responsible for prosecuting this guy, they very publicly said yesterday, yes, they advised the government and the police not to publish this information because it could, in their view, potentially prejudice the trial. And the police confirmed this, the government has confirmed this. Now, if you're Keir Starmer, this guy has just killed these 3 little girls, and you have 0.5% of doubt about whether or not, if you publish that information, this guy could walk. What are you going to do? You're not going to publish the information.
Yeah, but you see, here's where the problem comes. But here's where the problem comes, Dan, because, you know, what we've got now is a government and a Prime Minister who's more concerned, seemingly yesterday, about clamping down on the internet than he is about what the public actually feels about what he's done, and the fact that he's withheld information that he's admitted to withholding when he didn't have to withhold it. You know, I think the problem we're facing here, Dan, is that there is a creeping kind of sense, and I believe that this comes from the legal fraternity overall. They would rather not give any information out to journalists. They don't like journalists. They don't like people reporting on things that they don't want them to report on. Yeah, our job, right, is to question them. Our job, as I've just done with Alex Carlisle, is to say, no, mate, you're not right. You cannot stop free speech. You cannot stop me from saying this. This will not prejudice the trial, and you can't shut everybody down by pretending to make out that you might.
Yeah, but the point is, fine, then let's change the law. Then let's change.
We don't need to. Where was Keir Starmer's concern about breaking a trial and possibly giving away information that would ruin the prosecution of the far-right rioters, who he declared all to be far-right?
No, I'm sorry.
Before they were even put up in court.
But Mike, this is a completely different situation. Keir Starmer wasn't Prime Minister when he was saying that. Keir Starmer was Prime Minister in this instance.
He was Prime Minister when he was calling the rioters. Yeah, hang on, the riots happened when he was Prime Minister. What are you talking about?
Mike. No, that one. I thought you were talking about the one before. But Keir Starmer was not talking about specific individuals in relation to specific...
He was referring to them all as far-right thugs before the trial. Yes, he was.
Mike, come on. He was talking generally about the mass disorder we were seeing on the streets. He wasn't saying, here is defendant X, and he is responsible for Y. Now, this is what we're talking about in relation to the Southport killings. Now, I've just given you the scenario that Keir Starmer was presented with. He was presented with a scenario where the head of the CPS said to him, if you publish this information, you could prejudice the trial.
That doesn't make him right, though.
Keir Starmer, sorry?
That doesn't make him right, though, does it?
What do you mean it doesn't make it right?
It doesn't make him right.
That's the head of the CPS.
No. Yeah, but the CPS has got...
The CPS
come on.
To make the judgment.
Yes, I get that. But Dan, hang on. If you swallowed the Kool-Aid, remember what side of the fence you're on. You're on the side of journalism, right? The reason that we go after government officials and people who lead the CPS and ask them questions like, why didn't you bring any charges against Mohammed Al-Fayed? Why didn't you bring any charges against Jimmy Savile? Because they don't always get it right, and they need to be held to account.
Absolutely right. I am on the side of journalism,
right,
and I want to be able to publish as much as I can.
Yeah.
But I'm also on the side of justice. I'm also on the side of due process. And I'm also on the side of making sure that psychopaths who go around and murder 3 little girls don't have the slightest prospect of walking free.
There was no prospect of him walking free. But this is why we all have lawyers, right? There's lawyers at the Mail on Sunday. We have lawyers here because we challenge quite often in the courts because we are told we can't reveal certain things, and then we go and get a court order lifted because the law is a movable feast. It is not set in stone.
Right, Mike. Right, Mike. Right, so on Southport, what did your lawyers tell you could say on air?
Our lawyers told us that when there is an arrest, a case is not active in the same way that it is, in the same way that it is once the charge has been brought. We didn't have the information to report it. If I'd had the information to report, I would have gone to our lawyers and I would have very strenuously argued that I could reveal that information. And they might have told me, advised me against it. But I would have been pushing to do it, but I didn't have the information.
Yeah,
and guess why?
Absolutely.
Because it was being sat on by the Prime Minister and the CPS.
It wasn't, Mike, it wasn't. You just literally said, what happens in this instance is you go to your lawyers, your lawyers give you advice about whether you should or shouldn't say certain things in the public domain.
Yes.
That's exactly what Keir Starmer did.
No.
He went to the government's lawyers and said, what can we put in the public domain? Well, Mike, you're saying no. That is literally what happened.
But he didn't. Yeah, but the reason he did it is not being revealed, and that's where I'm saying he's been economical with the truth, because he didn't say.
The reason he did.
No,
we know the reason he did it.
No, come on. We know why he didn't want to reveal it, because he thought that it would be a problem for public order. He was worried that if he suddenly came out and said that this was a terror charge, that there would be an adverse reaction, right? When Joe Cox was murdered, how long did it take for the police and the CPS to reveal that the terrorist who killed her was a terrorist? How long do you think it took?
I have no idea when
it was 24 hours, right? So before the trial, hang on, before the trial of Joe Cox's murderer, he was called a terrorist by the authorities, okay?
Because the police prosecuted the crime and prosecuted him and prosecuted it as a terror attack. It was led by the investigation was led by the anti-terror police.
What's the difference?
This is another mad part.
This was investigated. This was also investigated by the terror police, right? The reason they found the ricin, and the reason they found the Al Qaeda manual, because they went to his house as the terror police, treating him as a terrorist, arresting him as a terrorist. Right. They didn't charge him with a terror offence. And my question to you is, why not?
Mike, if we're going to talk about this, we have to talk about the facts.
I'm talking about the facts.
Has not been prosecuted for the murders under terror offences.
Yes.
The police.
But that's wrong, isn't it? That's wrong. Even Keir Starmer said that yesterday. He's now saying he's a terrorist.
Mike, I don't actually think it is wrong, but whether Keir... relevant.
What do you think Keir Starmer said yesterday? Did he say he was a terrorist or not?
No.
Yes, he did.
He didn't say
he
was a terrorist.
Well, look, he's written a piece in the Sun today. In the Sun today, right? He has said terrorism has changed. We must guard against loners and misfits who threaten us, and I will root them out. He's saying he's a terrorist. Right?
Absolutely.
So he's saying he's a terrorist, right? Can we get that out of the way?
No, Mike. Listen again, right? You may have your view about whether he's a terrorist. Keir Starmer may have his view of a terrorist. I may have a view of as a terrorist. In the run-up to the trial, that is not relevant. There is a legal definition of terror.
Yes.
The police...
Which is also wrong.
The police and the prosecutors took the judgment he was not a terrorist.
Yes. And that's wrong.
Now, you may disagree with that.
Well, no, Keir Starmer wants to change the law, doesn't he? So he disagrees with it.
Fine.
Right.
Fine.
And you've also said the key words. You've also said the key words leading up to the trial. Okay. Now, before the individual is charged, there is no trial. So between arrest and charge, that's not leading up to a trial because there isn't one.
Mike, what was the window between the guy being arrested and the guy being charged?
It was quite some time before they admitted what his name was, right? Because there was a court order. Hang on. I'm giving you
the window?
I'm giving you the history of the whole thing, right? He was arrested.
But what was the window?
He was arrested at the scene, right? He was obviously not going to be a problem to prove his guilt or innocence because he was arrested at the scene. He didn't, they didn't have to prove that he was there. He was there. They arrested him at the scene. He then, because he was 17 years old, had the right to keep his name out of the public domain. But a court order was made by, I believe, the police to actually reveal his name because there was some speculation about whether or not he might be a small boat refugee, a migrant who had come here. All of that
wasn't
stuff.
Covered up,
No, that wasn't covered up. But the point is that they released his name, but nothing else. And so there was no reason for them not to...
Mike, I'm sorry, you're not answering the question.
Well, I don't remember exactly what the length of time was, but it was probably a couple of weeks.
The reality is...
It was probably a couple of weeks.
A couple of weeks. I don't think it was a couple of weeks. He was charged with the murders.
It wasn't immediate, is what I'm saying. It wasn't immediate.
The point... Mike, come on, let me finish. He was charged with the murders in relatively short order.
Yes,
now,
but it certainly wasn't the same day, though.
Mike, on the same day, they had not found the supposed Al-Qaeda manual.
No.
On the same day, they had not confirmed the material at the house was ricin. The material had to be sent off to put them down the laboratory to be properly processed.
Okay.
The manual was not found until later when they actually went through his computers, his hard drives, all his material. That information was not available until he had been charged with the murders.
Yes, okay, I get all that, right? But the point is...
I'm sorry, but you were saying completely the opposite.
Well, no, I wasn't, actually.
You were. You were saying...
No, they found the stuff...
You were saying there was no crime.
They found the stuff...
There was no pending... Mike,
they found the stuff...
No,
they found the stuff before... No, I will do. They found... Look, listen, we can argue about the timing, right? We knew the police were searching his home. We knew the police had found what was called incriminating evidence at his home. We were told about that, right? Also, there's a duty of care that needs to be considered here, and people have said this at the time as well. If this guy's producing ricin in his house, surely the people who live near that property need to know that that was what he was doing. You know, so there's also that aspect of information which is useful, which again many people have argued on my side should have been released. People should have been told that this is what he was up to, you know?
Mike, again, that is a matter for the police in consultation with the Crown.
Well, the police are saying that they were told not to say anything by the CPS, which is not the case in every other case.
The CPS said if you release this information, so there was a balance there. But the point is, it comes back to the fundamental issue. If the Crown Prosecution Service say, do not release this information, because if you do, it runs a risk of prejudicing trial, you are literally saying you think the Prime Minister of the country should ignore that and put the information out anyway.
I'm saying that what should happen is that questions should be asked about the motivation as to why that instruction is being given out. And what we do know about the two-tier system we have of justice in this country is that things happen in a very different way. Look at what happened in Manchester, at Manchester Airport. We can't talk about that. Guess why? Because now there's a charge. So I don't want to get into that. But for a long time, there was no charge. There was lots being said about the circumstances surrounding that particular case between the arrest and the charge, right? So you can't have it both ways. You know, the CPS didn't say anything. Hang on. The CPS didn't say anything about that. They didn't make any recommendation. All they kept saying was, we're considering what to do, right? And for months and months on end, nothing happened. So the idea that you can now argue that in some cases you have to say nothing and in other cases you don't means that the system isn't working, does it?
But Mike, you just contradicted yourself.
No,
you
I haven't.
Can't have it both ways. We're not having it both ways.
You are.
You've literally just said you and I cannot discuss the Manchester Airport case because it could potentially prejudice the trial.
Yes. But no, that's
but we know the same situation.
No, it's not, because we know much more about the two assailants in that case than we did about this guy. That's my point. But I'm being told we haven't got time for this, so we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one. I mean, in some ways, I feel slightly warm and fuzzy, Dan, because we've been getting on far too well lately. So it's about time we disagreed about something.
The natural order has been restored.
Yeah, thank God. Anyway, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Dan Hodges, commentator from the Mail on Sunday. The clear situation is that Keir Starmer had room to declare the terrorism before the charge. No question at all. We now know that, and that is surely the issue. And if you're going to tell me that the CPS is desperate to protect the seriousness and the neutrality of the trial process in every single case, I'm going to tell you that's a load of BS, because it simply isn't true. Right? This is Morning Glory.
breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court. Axel Rudo-Cubana has pleaded guilty to murdering 3 young girls in the knife attack at the Taylor Swift-themed dance class.
The tragedy of the Southport killing must be a line in the sand for Britain. There has been a failure here, and I don't intend to let any institution of the state deflect from their failures, and I acknowledge that readily here. And so if the law needs to change to recognise this new and dangerous threat, then we will change it, and quickly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:25. Got this from Ellie, who says, Mike, what a show. Wow, frightening to think that Lord Something is in any way connected with our judicial system. Well done, you. I'm supposed to be going out, but I can't now until your show's finished. Ellie, that's very kind. Rich in Cornwall, by Lord Carlisle's reasoning, he says, surely Starmer should be held in contempt for naming all the rioters charged as far right. Well, there is that. I mean, you do have to wonder about the two-tier system. Keir Starmer's written in The Sun today, this very morning on page 12, terrorism has changed, he says. We must guard against loners and misfits who threaten us, and I will root them out. He says we will review every aspect of our counter-extremism approach to make sure we can defeat it. That will mean difficult questions about how to protect our children from the tidal wave of violent videos online. Noah Hoffman's with us. She's political correspondent at The Sun. Noah, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Great to get the Prime Minister's view on this. He had a press conference yesterday at which he sort of more or less tried to say that the reason we couldn't call this guy a terrorist in the Southport case was because the legality and the legal kind of description of terrorism needs to be changed. So presumably he's going to do that.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the first times that we've really heard the Prime Minister launch a sort of fierce criticism at the state of the law and pledge to really change it when it comes to this issue. However, his announcement today about, this first big step that he's going to take to crack down on the so-called lone wolves and misfits, perhaps for his critics, is just not far enough and doesn't really go to the root of the issue. And they'd be looking more towards a change in the definition of terrorism rather than steps such as introducing two-tier verification system for buying knives online. So right. He is definitely, he's not running away from this issue, but there's a lot of different areas to be tackled. And the one you mentioned about changing the law is probably first and foremost in a lot of people's minds.
Yes, because, I mean, the front page, which says the Amazon killer, suggests that, basically he bought a knife in seconds, this guy, Axel Rudo-Cubana, aged just 17, when he shouldn't have been able to buy it. And somebody's pointing out on Twitter here for me that says any Amazon delivery, such as a knife or alcohol, has to be signed for by a person over the age of 18 showing proof of ID. My question would be, who signed for the knife? It's kind of a red herring in a way, though, isn't it? Because, I mean, we also know from stories that we've all covered about knife crime in this country that most knife crime is carried out by people using just a kitchen knife that they've taken out of their mum's drawer, and they haven't necessarily gone to the trouble of ordering, a zombie knife or some kind of horrible blade on the internet.
Yeah, and not just that, but if you're as, sort of psychotic as the Southport killer, you will find a way around whatever government-imposed verification system is there. If a kid desperately wants a knife, they're going to find it. If they want drugs, they're going to find it. If they want to access pornography, they're going to do it. So the government can make a lot of noise about introducing a sort of tougher system. But if you're as sort of deranged as someone such as this character is, you're going to find a way anyhow. And so a lot of critics this morning are saying, look, this just isn't good enough.
But that's the problem, isn't it? Because, you tend to find that criminals don't really pay much attention to the law. It's a bit like saying, on the front page of the Telegraph today, I don't want to change the subject, but, they're going to go after benefit cheats and they're going to say you won't be able to drive your car. Well, really? I mean, frankly, if you're cheating the benefits system, you're not really going to care if somebody says you're not allowed to drive your car. You're just going to drive it anyway, you know. And the other thing that sort of arises from it, I suppose, from what happened in Downing Street yesterday, front page of the Eye today has got Labour makes new threats to tackle tech moguls over harmful content. I mean, do you wonder whether there's any sort of, I don't know, enmity going on between some of the tech moguls like Elon Musk and like Matt Zuckerberg and Keir Starmer and the Labour government?
I mean, it's very easy to sort of picture Elon Musk, you know, reading an article like that and just laughing. And also, it's quite a bold goal to have with the advent of Donald Trump and seeing Silicon Valley literally turn in the other direction as he becomes president, you know, with the likes of Mark Zuckerberg saying we're now going to open up our restrictive free speech regulation. Yeah. The Labour government seems to be going actually in the complete opposite direction, not only of the White House, but of the Silicon Valley moguls themselves. So I think it's quite a tall order, and it will be interesting to see where this goes, particularly given that we know Elon Musk is not Keir Starmer's #1 fan, it's safe to say.
No, I mean, he's been a bit busy this week, hasn't he? So he's been laying off Starmer a little bit, but I dare say he'll return to punishment on him. Just a quick one for you on Starmer and Trump, just because you're in the firmament there in the political department of The Sun. When does Keir Starmer, if he knows, expect to have a conversation with the new president?
So when Keir Starmer gets invited to Washington is the million-dollar question, and we have been pressing the Prime Minister's spokesperson on this very matter. We haven't had any details yet, but it will be rather embarrassing if you have leaders that, you know, Trump is more aligned with, perhaps more right-wing, of smaller European states, and they get invited to Washington before Keir Starmer. His team, to be fair, go to really, really strong lengths to sort of highlight their credentials with the president. They always reference this dinner that Keir Starmer and David Lammy had with Donald Trump last July, saying how jovial it was, the banter was fantastic. But we still don't yet know when that visit to Washington will take place. And when it does take place, will be a really interesting indication of how the administration views this Labour government, which is trying very, very desperately hard to impress them.
Yes, indeed. And Peter Mandelson's name keeps coming up as well this week. You know, is he in? Is he out? Will he get the job? Will he not get the job? David Miliband now apparently helpfully offering himself up as the sacrificial lamb. I'll do the job and I won't be troublesome. What do you think is going to happen there?
I do think Keir Starmer has a track record of really sort of sticking to his guns on these issues in a similar way, to be fair, to the Tory government before him. They cling on for as long as possible until a situation becomes untenable. We saw that with Tulip Siddiq. You know, they defended her for weeks before she finally got laid off. The only sort of example of them quickly following the tide of opinion would be Louise Haigh, the former transport secretary. Yeah. She was culled pretty quickly, but she was also on a different sort of ideological wing to Keir Starmer. In terms of Peter Mandelson, they really are backing him. And I don't see that changing unless another sort of drastic event happens in the next few weeks, let's say.
No, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Noah Hoffman, political correspondent at The Sun there, telling us about Keir Starmer's piece in The Sun this morning on page 12. You can read it online as well. Southport murderer Axel Rudakabana was able to buy knives on Amazon in seconds despite being just 17 with a history of violence, and that's on the front page, the Amazon killer. Let's talk now though to Matt Vickers MP, Shadow Minister for Crime, Policing and Fire. Matt, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How's it going?
Yeah, very well indeed. We're trying to get to the bottom of Keir Starmer's rather perverse view of the law and also his rather strange view about why Axel Rudakabana was able to get a knife online, which apparently was the reason that he was able to commit those horrible crimes in Southport. I mean, as I've been saying, it's very simple to commit a knife crime in this country, I'm afraid. There's an awful lot of it, and most of it is committed by people simply armed with knives from their kitchen drawer.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrendous, but actually when you look at what happened there, you would kind of hope that human beings weren't capable of doing that to other human beings. Some of these individuals you kind of trying to account for and create a situation that prevents absolute evil people, animals, from getting hold of knives and doing terrible, terrible things to people.
Yes, exactly right. I mean, we are living in a time when there is an awful lot of violence around, and I mean, I'm not certain that it's due to the fact that there's a lot of violence online. I don't know what your party's policy is on this, but and I think Keir Starmer's going to find it pretty difficult to limit what's available online, isn't he?
Do you know what? There is already, it is an offence to sell a knife to someone who's under 18. That's already a thing.
Right.
There's also legislation came forward that said if you are an online retailer and you sell a knife to someone who is 18 that gets delivered to the house, you've got to make sure that there's a process in place that it's going to get handed to someone who's over 18. They've got to sign for it or whatever.
Yeah.
If someone's broken the law, if one of these people has sent this thing out illegally, then they should face the full consequences of the law. If not, that's what we need this review for. That's what we need this inquiry for, to get to the bottom of how we can prevent these things getting sold online like this.
Well, exactly right. But we're not just talking about the fact that you can buy a knife online. He's talking about the content that people can look at online. You know, the violence, the terror, the ghastliness, the real kind of, what you might regard as what would be called X-rated content that you can find, whether it's pornography, whether it's violence, whether it's terror. I don't think that's possible to really clamp down on either, is it?
It's a real challenge, but we've already seen movements in that direction. We've seen the online safety bill that's tried to do that, that's tried to control put responsibility on those online platforms for what can and can't be shared on them. That's what we've tried to do in recent years. But it is a huge challenge because there's all sorts of workarounds. You catching the person who's uploaded something onto the internet is a really big challenge because they could be anywhere in the globe doing what they want. But we have got to get a grasp of it. We've got to control it because we cannot have our young people seeing some of the horrendous things that they do see online.
Yeah, exactly. And let's talk a bit about the law here and the contempt laws as well, because I think Keir Starmer dropped a bit of a ricket, I think, yesterday when he tried to make out that, you can't say anything about a case as soon as somebody's arrested, that, you have to be careful that you don't prejudice a trial. I'm slightly worried that, he would be moving towards a kind of clamping down on freedom of speech because, journalism is as was famously said to me once, is all about telling people something that somebody doesn't want you to know, right? It's not about just producing a press release or interviewing Keir Starmer and putting out his words as if they're somehow, jewels from heaven. It's about asking difficult questions. It's about finding out things that people don't want you to know. And I don't think we want to live in a country where the Prime Minister basically says as soon as somebody gets arrested, you can't say anything about them. You can't find out who they are. You can't say anything about their background because that's not actually the law.
Well, do you know what? We welcome the fact there's an inquiry on this issue. Well, on the whole Southport issue, the horrendous things that went on in Southport. But we want to make sure that this is included. We want to actually have the discussion about what should and shouldn't be said. And actually, for all Keir said he didn't want to talk about it, the reality is that the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation has said that you do have to be frank with the public. You have to share what information you can. There is a limit. You don't want to prejudice a trial and go into the details. But actually, the worst case scenario that we've seen in recent times was Angela Rayner trotted out on the 21st, 31st of July and said anybody suggesting that this is a terror incident is spreading fake news and conspiracy theories. Right. The government has to be upfront with the public. Otherwise, then misinformation and online sources will fill that gap. And actually, the government not only has to share what it can, it has to not go out there and say the opposite of what's gone on.
Exactly right. Just one final one for you, Matt, on Rachel Reeves. She's over in Davos today, her and David Beckham. It's a right old jamboree over there at the moment. Unfortunately for her, though, the country has been hit by the biggest job slump since COVID. We've just had breaking news this morning that the debt spiral has now gone, in some ways, probably past what the fiscal rules are that she's supposed to be adhering to. I mean, how much more of this can we take? I mean, how much further down the gurgler can the economy go with these people?
Do you know what? I think she should be ashamed to turn up in Davos, the state that she's left our economy in. She's borrowing £40 billion more of borrowing, £70 billion more of spending. But do you know what? It's tale as old as time. We know what happens whenever Labour get into power. They start spending like nobody's watching, taxing like nobody's noticed, and they go for it. And every Labour government in history has left with unemployment higher than when they arrived in office. That's not just a stat. That is people's lives. That's their ability to take home a pay packet for their children, for their families. It's horrendous what they're doing to the economy. Inflation is going up, tax is going up, unemployment is going up. It's horrendous, and it has real consequences for people across this country.
Absolutely right. Apparently the Treasury borrowed £17.8 billion last month. What on earth are they doing with it?
It's absolutely horrendous. But you know what? For anybody who was here under the last Labour government, it's not unexpected, is it? It's kind of where we knew we would end up.
Yeah.
The economy crashed. Anybody who dares to get up early, go out, earn a living, invest in a job, try and create jobs for others, push a bit of growth in the economy. We should stop calling him Keir Starmer. He should be called Keir Shrinker. The damage he's doing to this economy is unbelievable.
At least Tony Blair took 10 or 11 years to crash the economy. I mean, these guys have done it inside 10 months.
Yeah, they're moving fast. They're moving fast.
Typical. Great stuff. Good to talk to you. Thank you. Matt Vickers, MP, Shadow Minister for Crime, Policing and Fire. Let's get a voice note from Andy.
Morning, Mike. Andy from Aylesbury. That absolute prat, Lord Carlisle. I don't understand how you can justify saying that it's the law, that you're not allowed to be prejudicial towards the court. Do you remember the attack on Finsbury Park Mosque? Keir Starmer said that was a terrorist attack within half an hour of the guy being arrested.
Yeah.
Not only that, you got the murder of Joe Cox. He also said that was a terrorist attack, again, within minutes of the guy being arrested. And then the rioters over the summer, they were described as being far-right thugs by Keir Starmer before they didn't a plea in court. It's cobblers. Anyway, love the show. See you later.
Absolutely right. Andy knows more about the law than Lord Carlisle. This is the thing. You know, the question about what is terrorism and what is not terrorism is not as simple as what the legal definition of terrorism is. It's about what the powers that be want you to think. As we just were reminded there by Matt Vickers, I'd forgotten about that. Angela Rayner actually came out and said anyone who calls Southport a terrorist attack is peddling fake news and is a conspiracy theorist. Well, that was a flat-out lie, because she must have known about the terror aspect of it as well. So it's worse than them just pretending that they weren't allowed to let information out. They're now actually admitting to concealing it, and we know why. Everybody knows why. It's like the Emperor's new clothes. You know what's going on, but they won't admit it. It's that simple. 8:40, I'm Mike Graham.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:42. I'm Mike Graham. How about this from Chris in South Yorkshire? Mike, thank you for all the passion and feeling that you are giving into the terrible stabbing of the 3 innocent girls in Southport. It's a national disgrace. Let us remember those innocent children and their families at this time. I know that is why you are rightly passionate about this issue. Absolutely right. And one here from Russell in Alicante. Mike, just a thought. When John Warboys was arrested, the police immediately put out a statement asking for more victims to come forward. No prejudice there. That idiot was talking complete nonsense. Exactly right. You know, the law is very, very clear. In all instances, if you're arrested, the police can issue all manner of bits of information in order to help them with the case, right? Plenty of people get arrested and let go. Plenty of people get arrested and get released on bail. Plenty of people get arrested and then are free to walk around and never, ever get to court. But it doesn't mean you can't say anything about them or say anything about the nature of their arrest or the nature of the circumstances of that arrest. You know, I don't know, it's like talking to complete idiots who are trying to tell me something that black is white. It isn't. Let's talk to Laurie Laird, though, US commentator, because, of course, we're still in the throes of the new era, the golden age, I think they're calling it, of Donald Trump. He's only been in 2 days. He's already changing the world. He's already changing the face of America. Laurie, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Greg.
It's quite good time to be alive, this, isn't it? I mean, it's common sense is now the order of the day, because I invented the phrase common sense. We're the home of common sense right here on Talk. And now suddenly...
you personally invented that term.
I did.
Then we're all a grateful nation.
And this is now the sort of the catchphrase of the station. And I keep saying, you know, I should have copyrighted it, because they now use it on every promo that we've got, and I'd be making an awful lot of money. But I didn't. So there we are. But now Donald Trump is talking about it and saying that it's a revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. And that's really what people want. But just before we go on, let me play you a little clip from yesterday. The Right Reverend Marian Edgar Bood apparently managed to slip through the net. She didn't get vetted before she said these words to an assembled Trump audience.
In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. Some who fear for their lives.
They don't look too impressed there, do they? The various Trumpers in the crowd there. And he since then has released a tweet saying that she's a disgrace, she's not very good at her job, and she should apologise for the things that she said.
Yeah, none of that surprises me a great deal. But you got to remember, this is not a cohort that worships all that frequently. Although I think J.D. Vance is a bit of a churchgoer. Look, you know, there will be dissent. There will be. Donald Trump was elected, no question at all about his legitimacy. But that doesn't mean that all of the country agrees with him. This is the way it's meant to be, Mike. You do have an elected official, but it's okay that people can express opinions that are different than his. One thing that has surprised me a great deal is Donald Trump. You know, in the days before the inauguration, we saw a different Donald Trump, right? We saw him on stage in the in what looked to be campaign rallies ahead of his inauguration, and he looked relaxed. Yeah. He was sort of bopping around with the village people a little bit. That sort of brooding, angry Donald Trump that we saw for the year through 2021 and 2022, that was gone. He looked confident. He looked like he was comfortable with where he was, because even during his first term, he was on the defenses. It really rankled that he did not win the popular vote. Now we have Donald Trump about to take office with no questions over the legitimacy of that victory. And I wondered whether that would give him a degree of comfort and to give him the latitude that perhaps to not pursue an agenda that some Americans do find difficult to accept. He had the latitude to do that. But that has not happened. He has been pretty true to form. He has acted on a number of his campaign promises and looks set to do that over the next coming days.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's going to be fascinating to see, because, of course, many of the people who voted for Donald Trump voted for him because they trusted his stewardship of the economy. And he does seem to be bringing in an awful lot of money, doesn't he? I mean, he's got trillions and trillions of dollars coming his way.
Oh, this is something that I find absolutely fascinating, Mike. There are two things that I think Donald Trump can fairly claim a mandate for. One is to do something about the border. Americans made it very clear that this is a big concern of theirs. The other is the cost of living. And this is something else that Americans said that they had had enough with Biden. They blame the Democrats for the high cost of living. The thing is that these two issues may be in tension with each other. A lot of the food price inflation that Americans have complained of may be exacerbated if Donald Trump is able to get a large number of illegal immigrants out of the country. Hard to guess how many illegal immigrants are in the workforce. Best guess economists have is about 1 in 6. It's pretty hefty. A lot of these migrants work in the food, agricultural industry, meat processing industry. And if these people are rounded up and taken out of the country, we are going to see an immediate increase in the prices of these items. So Donald Trump's desire to bring the cost of living down may be in tension with his desire to get illegal migrants out of the country.
Yes, well, we'll see how that all goes, because all eyes are on it, because if it does work, then we're going to do it here, I think, or at least we're going to try. Thank you, Laurie. Laurie led the US commentator. Let's get a voice note from Joanne on Southport.
Morning, Mike. Joanne from Norfolk. So we all know why we are in the situation we are in with regards to the Rudy Cabana trial and the questions being asked of what was known and when it was known. They didn't want any of the information that they could have shared to go out there, because arguably the elephant in the room, immigration, would have stirred up a hornet's nest, and they knew that.
Yeah, and they're dead scared of the hornet's nest. Instead of taking the hornets on and killing the hornets, they're worried about the hornets stinging them. Absolutely ridiculous. This is, of course, Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 9. I don't know how we got here. Where's the time going? Absolutely incredible. Very misty looking out there, by the way. So if you're trying to fly anywhere today, you might want to check that the planes are still going, because it doesn't look great. We've got lots of great messages coming in as well. Keep those coming. 0344 499 1000 for the voice notes. Messages at talkTV on X. And, of course, 87222 is the text number as well. We'll be back with more after this.
If you just have lots of people coming in, you don't know who they are. Even on a subconscious level, I mean, we're saying it explicitly, you're going to feel less safe, you're going to feel less trust in your environment. And if you perceive the politicians and the authorities who are supposed to be managing the system as weak, as not doing their job, that's going to lead to such frustration. And I do feel that there is a huge loss of trust. And I think it's, you know, obviously it was directed at the Conservatives in the last election. I mean, there was huge anger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:53. We're going to talk to Dr. John Dean very shortly, Clinical Vice President of the Royal College of Physicians, about corridor care in the NHS. But first, let me just read you this from Bill, who says this. Morning, Mike. Great job holding these establishment bozos to account. My own experience with Prevent, I'm a retired supply teacher, now aged 78. When I was still working some 10 years ago, the supply agency I was working for insisted I come in to do an online questionnaire thing in their offices to do with spotting terrorists and what one should do if one did. The questions were very much slanted towards right-wing stuff, with a couple of mentions only of Islamic terrorism. The whole thing took about 40 minutes and was a total waste of time and a load of woke nonsense, politically correct garbage and completely irrelevant to me as a supply teacher in North Hertfordshire. Well, there you go. I mean, I think Prevent absolutely is not fit for purpose, despite whatever Lord Carlisle thinks. He thinks it's doing a great job. Let's talk, though, to Dr. John Dean, because the Royal College of Physicians has called for a zero-tolerance approach to NHS corridor care. We found out last week that many people in this country now go to a hospital and they spend quite a long time in a corridor because there aren't enough beds for them to get into. Dr. John, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning.
What does zero-tolerance mean when it comes to corridor care? Just that it shouldn't happen?
Yeah, it shouldn't happen in a modern health service. But the reality is we don't actually know the size of the problem because we don't know how many people who've been admitted to hospital are either in a trolley on a corridor or in or an extra patient on a ward without the normal bedside facilities, or potentially another area like a gym or something that's been converted into a temporary ward. But we don't know the size of that problem because the NHS is not measuring it and the NHS is not reporting it. Until we know the size of the problem, we won't know whether we're improving the situation or not. And there are clear things that we can do to improve the situation. So a zero tolerance means we know the size of the problem, we're doing things about it, and we're tracking that it's improving so we can eliminate it.
Do you think they're not reporting it because they kind of would rather it wasn't paid attention to, or they'd rather pretend that it didn't exist?
I think they're not reporting it for a number of reasons. Firstly, when we report anything, we've got to be really clear what the measure is, that it's an accurate measure. It's something that historically we didn't think would be happening, so we haven't set up systems to measure it. We're reassured to a degree that NHS England have asked Trust to start measuring it. We haven't seen the definition of that measure because we want to know all the people who've been admitted to hospital who are not in a bed space with the facilities that you would expect. The ability to call a nurse, able to get a drink, turn the light off at night so you can sleep, your medicine's easily available for you, monitored in case you're deteriorating. All of these things need to be there for every patient that's admitted to hospital. And that's what we're putting really clearly in our guidance. What are the basic standards that every patient admitted to hospital has? And when you're in extremis, yes, you may have to very occasionally take these measures, but you still got to make sure those things are in place for patients to keep them safe. But it's not in extremis now. This is commonplace. This is happening all year round in every hospital almost in this country.
And what do you think is the answer? And I know that's quite a complicated question probably for you to have 2 minutes to answer it. But I mean, is it simply putting more beds into hospitals? Is it simply expanding the size of the wards?
It's multifactorial. I mean, the issue, 1 in 8 patients who are currently in acute hospitals don't need to be in acute hospitals because they've recovered adequately from their acute care, but the community or support facilities and social care are not there for them. So if we were to free up 1 in 8 beds, we would not be having patients on extra beds or in corridors. So that's where the effort has to go. But there are a series of processes within hospitals that can help, and that we need to just tweak every bit of the system so that patients are getting timely care throughout their stay and then getting home when they're ready to get home. But if 1 in 8 patients who are in hospital don't need to be in hospital because they've recovered adequately, then, when we know the numbers, I suspect it won't, it will be within that 1 in 8 that we could get in. There is, in the way the current system's working, we need more beds and more staff. But the predominant issue is getting people out of hospital when they're well enough to get out of hospital.
Sure. That seems to be a really, really key thing. Dr. John Dean, thank you very much indeed. Clinical Vice President of the Royal College of Physicians. How about this from Zoe in Lancashire? Morning, Mike. Starmer won't say anything about this horrible terrorist because he's scared to death of losing the Islamic vote. The same way he won't stop the boats because of the votes. He hates our country, says Zoe. One from Sally in Islington says, morning, Mike. Isn't it sad that we need to have an organisation like Prevent in the first place? This social experiment that has been forced upon our country by the likes of Tony Blair and many after him has not worked, and it needs to stop. And one just on David Beckham, who found himself in Davos yesterday. He's in the Sun this morning. And perhaps David Beckham thought he'd been invited to launch a new aftershave. Great show as always, says Linda in North Lincolnshire. Well, that's the thing. Davos has now been taken over by what can only be described as, and I don't mean any disrespect to David Beckham, by sort of, what you might call second-rate celebrities, right? Rachel Reeves is there. Jonathan Ashworth is there, right? Even Keir Starmer thought it was beneath him. Donald Trump hasn't gone. The Russians haven't gone for years because they're not allowed to go there anymore because of the war in Ukraine. A lot of the big American leaders and of companies have not gone. So what is the point of Davos? Has it outlived its usefulness? That would be one question that I would ask. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be talking to John Rentoul, the man who, as you well know, is nicknamed John It's Not a Story Rental. We'll be asking him about Lord Carlisle and what he makes of the whole situation with Keir Starmer and the law. Does he even know what he's talking about? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory. We're into the final hour. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here just before 10 to tell us what's coming up on her show. We had a very interesting conversation a bit earlier in the show with Lord Alex Carlisle, the former 2011 Prevent Strategy Reviewer. It didn't quite go the way he thought it was going to go, and so apparently he doesn't want to come back on to explain himself. But that's another story. But the reason we were arguing, of course, was because of Keir Starmer's statement yesterday, which he made in Downing Street at around about 8:30, in which he said basically he did know an awful lot about the Southport terrorist. He did know that Axel Arruda had been referred to Prevent 3 times. He did know that he was in receipt of the Al-Qaeda manual. He did know that, in fact, there was ricin found at his house, but he didn't tell anyone that because he worried that the trial might in fact be in some way put at risk. Well, I've been maintaining, and I can keep maintaining it because I know I'm right, that is absolute and utter rubbish. There is no reason to suggest that at the time that Rudy Kibana was arrested and not charged, there was no issue about a trial because in fact there was no trial. So you couldn't prejudice something that wasn't even scheduled to happen yet. And once he was finally charged, and it did become clear that he was a terrorist and had been involved in terrorist activity, that story came out at back end of October last year when there was additional charges brought. We could have then had that information. But of course, what we also know is that when Joe Cox's murderer was apprehended, before he was charged and when he was arrested, he was declared to be a terrorist in the North London mosque case. When a man drove a car into several Muslim worshippers outside that mosque, he was declared to be a terrorist straight away by the police. The police in the Telegraph this morning are even saying on Merseyside that they were told by the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, not to reveal what they knew about Rudy Kibana because it might prejudice the trial. There is an entire cover-up going on here. We know it. You know it. It's very clear what's going on. It's all about cultural sensitivities. It's as simple as that, and I'm not having it. 0344 499 1000 is the number. John Rentoul's coming up in a moment, chief political commentator at The Independent. The man that likes to deny a story is there. We'll see what he has to say about this one. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Now, just in case you missed it and you weren't listening, because not everybody can listen from 6 to 10. I know that Kevin O'Sullivan's listening at the moment because he's apparently casting some aspersions on some of the things that I've been saying. But good to see you listening and watching and learning. And we'll play some of your gaffes out on Friday, mate. Thanks very much indeed. My clash, though, a little bit earlier with Lord Alex Carlisle, the former 2011 Prevent Strategy Reviewer. Have a listen.
You have to remember that Prevent is a scheme that depends on cooperation. And I find it very difficult to believe that this perpetrator would have cooperated with Prevent. That may be the reason why he was not admitted to the Prevent programme, which is very successful with many people, but not all.
Well, I would have to say that I would disagree with you on that as well, because Prevent is clearly not fit for purpose. Would you not agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that at all.
What exactly has been good that Prevent has done?
Prevent has done what it says in on the tin.
Well, it hasn't prevented anything, has it? It hasn't prevented young children being killed. No, it hasn't prevented young children from being killed. It hasn't prevented the London Bridge attacker from killing people when he came to Fisherman's Hall. You know, it has failed multiple times to protect the British public. So therefore, the word Prevent is not even a suitable moniker for the organisation.
Can I now answer your question?
Please do.
Or whichever question you want me to answer.
Well, you tell me you tell me what successes Prevent has provided us with.
I was about to, but you interrupted me during my first
I'm sorry. You're obviously not used to robust conversations, are you? Well, yeah, because I'm not going to be spoken down to like some kind of child. Okay, I don't know who you think you are. Just because you're a lord does not give you the ability to lord it over the rest of the public. Okay, so talk to me as an equal, or else you can get lost, frankly.
I thought you were a journalist.
I am a journalist. Yes, I am.
I'm going to answer your question if you'll shut up for a minute.
Go ahead.
Right. Prevent has done a great deal of good. Prevent has prevented large numbers of people from becoming terrorists, but it does not succeed in every case, and you could not expect it to succeed in every case.
Yes, unfortunately, he couldn't actually name one terrorist that hasn't become a terrorist thanks to Prevent, because this is what they say about these organisations. They get a load of public money and they say, what have you actually done today? We prevented loads of people from not being terrorists. Oh, really? Where are they? We can't really say. They're over there somewhere. Well, how do you know they were going to be terrorists? Well, we don't know that. Right, so what you've actually told me is a complete lie. That's right, because I can't actually add up something that might have happened and didn't happen and claim the credit for it. Do you see what I'm saying? You can't say that we've prevented loads of people from being terrorists without saying these are the people that we prevented from being terrorists. He then went on to say that one of them became a journalist. I don't think it was John Rentoul. John Rentall's here, though, chief political commentator from The Independent. John, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. It wasn't me. No, you're quite right.
As I suspected. Lord Alex Carlisle's an interesting cove, right? Only last September, he was talking about how he agreed with previous colleagues of his in the House of Lords who thought that actually more information should be forthcoming in these cases, and it would be more helpful for the general good of society if the kind of information which he now thinks should be released should be released. And so he seems to have changed his mind in the course of a few short months, and I don't understand why he would do that. I've been talking a lot this morning about Keir Starmer's statement yesterday, because I think he's being slightly economical with the truth. I'm expecting you probably won't agree with me on this, but I think that to say that you can't say anything about a trial in case you prejudice it is sort of rather like taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut, isn't it?
No, it's not at all. Perfectly reasonable point made by the Prime Minister. And Alex Carlisle is a very important guy who's done some very useful public service. And when he says that Prevent, I mean, he's the independent reviewer of the Prevent programme.
Yeah, he was.
Prevent has been successful in some cases. Well, then I would take his word for it rather than yours.
Well, hang on, John. Hang on.
No, Mike.
I've got a fact for you.
You were incredibly rude to him.
No,
and you're not going to play the same games with me.
I've got a fact for you.
Answer your questions, and I'm not going to listen to you interrupting.
You don't have to listen to me interrupting you if you just let me speak. The point is he was removed from the review of Prevent in 2019 for not being impartial enough. What do you make of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's got quite strong views about terrorism, about Al Qaeda, and about Islamic.
Right. Well, why was he removed?
I've got no idea.
But it doesn't exactly.
What's that got to do with? What's that got to do with anything?
Well, you're saying you would believe him ahead of me.
No, Mike, I'm really puzzled as to what do you were talking about cultural sensitivities earlier.
Yeah.
You're basically interviewing yourself, which is very entertaining and all that. But it's about time you let somebody else have a word in.
Everybody talks to me.
What do you mean by these cultural sensitivities? What are you talking about?
Well, I'm only using that phrase because that's the phrase that Keir Starmer used yesterday when he was talking about cultural sensitivities and why they should not get in the way of police work and why they should not get in the way of prosecutions and why they should not get in the way of prosecuting people who might be guilty. Well, no, it's his phrase. It's not my phrase. If you want to find out what he means by cultural sensitivity, you should ask him.
What is your difference of opinion with the Prime Minister in that case? He and you are using the same language to describe the same problem.
No, I'm not using the same language to describe the problem. I'm saying that I know very well why there is a two-tier justice system in this country, as does everybody else, and you know it as well. You may not wish to admit it.
I don't. You're talking rubbish, and you can't substantiate.
All right.
Why do you think the Prime Minister did not disclose the information that he knew about?
He said why he didn't disclose it. He says he didn't disclose it because it might prejudice the trial.
Correct.
However, my argument with that is an argument about the law, because I've been a journalist for a very long time. I've never prejudiced the trial. I've never been found in contempt of court, and I know exactly where the boundaries are and what you can say and what you can't say. And as people have pointed out, there have been previous cases where terrorism has been a factor, as it is in this case, because he's now admitted that it was a factor, even though it was decided that they wouldn't call it that at the beginning until last October, when they did finally charge Ruda Cabana with a terrorism offence. What's basically happened here is that they've taken those cultural sensitivities and allowed them to affect the case, and that's
in your opinion.
Well, no, that's what Keir Starmer said yesterday.
No, it isn't. No, that is not. No, he said he did not disclose that information because it would prejudice the trial.
No,
you say that is not true and that he has a different motive. Why does that matter?
Well, it matters because I think people are concerned that there are two things going on here. When Joe Cox's murder happened, right, the perpetrator of that murder was called a terrorist straight away, OK? They didn't wait for the trial. They didn't wait until it came out in court. Okay. They said it, OK?
Yeah, but why does that why does it matter that Keir Starmer didn't disclose this information?
Well, it matters because if Keir Starmer is not being entirely truthful about why he didn't release it, and I think we all know that he's being slightly careful in the way that he says these things, right? You know that Keir Starmer was quite happy to label everybody far right who took part in the
he wasn't.
the riots.
No,
yes,
he wasn't. He said the issue was exploited by the far right.
No, he said that they.
Mike,
why does it matter? He talks about far right thugs who hadn't
How does it help prevent similar awful atrocities happening in the future? To go on and on about why Keir Starmer didn't say something because he thought it would prejudice the trial.
Well, I think it matters because I think we need to know the truth.
How
and
does it help?
We need to know the motivation. And quite frankly, as I've said...
How does it help
as I've said before, if you've got a terrorism act that takes place at a particular time, at a particular place, the people, I think, have a right to know that it was an act of terrorism. Because, for example...
But this is just playing with words,
No,
Mike.
it's not.
As the Prime Minister explained very carefully yesterday, there are different definitions of terrorism. This guy, the Southport killer, was not a conventional terrorist in the sense that he was affiliated to
Not a conventional terrorist. Well, what would you describe as a conventional terrorist?
Well, he was someone who was obsessed with violence and didn't appear to have an ideology. Yes, but
he obviously did have an ideology.
A form of terrorism.
Well, yeah,
but that also applies to American school shootings, as the Prime Minister said.
Well, he's not president of America.
You're just dancing on the head of a pin.
No, it's
not. What is the purpose of your trying to spread doubt and
not at all. No, listen, what I do, John, is I reflect the feelings of the people that listen to me, OK? I'm not spreading anything. And what people say to me is they don't trust
You're on
the
television,
system.
Mike. You are talking to the people. You are spreading stuff.
No, I'm sharing what people's concerns are, because an awful lot of the media doesn't do that, OK? And in fact, Beth Rigby and Harry Cole yesterday were standout members of the press because they actually asked the right question to the Prime Minister. Because
so they did ask the question. So there isn't an MSM conspiracy, no.
I've never said there's any kind of conspiracy. I don't know what
you just said it. You just said that you reflect things that other people don't reflect on the media.
Yeah, that's true, because many people watch us because they don't
you have opinions which are not shared by everybody in this country.
I have opinions which are shared by a lot of people in this country.
But I'm entitled to disagree with them.
Well, of course you can disagree. That's why we've got you here. We have you on here to disagree with me, John, because, you know, it's important that we have...
And I'm doing a very good job of it.
You do a very good job of it. I mean, it doesn't help that after every session we have, everybody tells me that you've been completely hopeless and useless at defending your position, but that doesn't matter. The point is that surely you would agree...
because you have a very particular audience on this channel.
Surely you would agree, John, that it's important that we trust our politicians. It's important that we trust the Prime Minister.
And at the moment, trying to undermine that trust.
No, I'm not trying to undermine it. He's undermining it himself by behaving in the way that he does. You can explain away, if you wish, why Keir Starmer's so unpopular in this country. I have a view of why he is. Why do you think he's so unpopular?
Well, because he's inherited a very difficult situation from the Conservatives, and he's not very good at politics.
He inherited it in July.
Simple.
He inherited it in July, and now that he's been in 6 months, people hate him even more.
Yes, because some of the chickens have come home to roost from the Tory overspending.
So it's nothing to do with what he's done.
Incontinence.
So
well, he hasn't. He's not a great communicator. He's not.
He's terrible.
He's not Tony Blair, which is a shame.
He's terrible.
Well, I don't think he is terrible, and I don't think when he says that he didn't disclose this information because he feared it would prejudice the trial, I don't think you've got any right to question his motivation. Because
I have every right to question his motivation because I'm a journalist, unlike you, who are just a hagiographer of people that you agree with, right? Let's have a listen to what Keir Starmer said about not prejudicing the trial of people who had been involved in the riots. Have a look.
I won't shy away from calling it what it is. Far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country, and we will bring them to justice.
I would say that might be prejudicial to a trial, wouldn't you?
No.
No,
I don't see why not. Well, you think throwing bricks at a mosque?
No, I'm not talking about the alleged crime.
About.
Hang on, John. You're innocent until proven guilty, right? You would agree with that premise, presumably.
Yes, of course.
So everyone who turns up who has been charged with a crime is entitled to a fair trial. You would agree with that. So when the Prime Minister alleges that you, as somebody who has been charged with a crime, are a far-right thug and basically terrorising people in their community, surely that is prejudicial to your possible innocence, isn't it?
No, I don't think so.
You
Because
don't think so?
those trials would have gone on the evidence, and I think.
But the trial of a boy man who was found in a room with 3 dead children and several bloody teachers, his trial was more likely to be somehow unsuccessful.
But could it? Well, I don't know, but it could have been prejudiced by disclosure. Well, because you're then influencing the jury if you.
What about when Angela Rayner said in I think it was late July, basically anyone who says this is an act of terrorism is spreading fake news and conspiracy theories. That was wrong. She shouldn't have said that.
No, she shouldn't have said that. And I agree with you, actually, Mike, that the Prime Minister shouldn't have used the term far right. I don't think it was helpful.
No, I don't think so. So all I'm saying is
I don't think it made a jot of difference to those.
No, but it makes
to the trials of those people involved in violence.
Well, maybe not, but it makes a difference to the people who see how he behaves and how he speaks. And if he wants to be taken seriously, he wants to be trusted, he wants to restore trust and transparency, as he always says, and he said it yesterday, in the government, then he needs to behave in a transparent way. And he hasn't been transparent. It's as simple as that.
Well, it's a difficult business being Prime Minister.
Yeah, I know.
He didn't speak perfectly, but his point was absolutely clear, which he made several times on other occasions, which is that the issue in Southport was being exploited by right-wing organisations. I mean,
yes,
I wouldn't use
that wasn't the story.
Right and left in any of these contexts myself.
But that wasn't the story.
His point was perfectly straightforward and perfectly simple, and people like you, I'm afraid, have deliberately misunderstood it.
Not at all.
Are trying to cause trouble.
No, I'm not trying to cause trouble at all. Keir Starmer is trying to convince us all, while telling us that he withheld information for a particular reason, which I don't happen to believe. He says he did it because he was worried that there wouldn't be a fair trial.
Well, we're back to the start, Mike.
Yeah.
Why does it matter that he withheld information for a different reason? It doesn't make any difference.
Because I want him to be truthful.
It doesn't make any difference to the court case. It doesn't make any difference to preventing this kind of stuff happening in future.
It's not about preventing it happening. You can't prevent nutters from carrying out terrorist acts and being horrible murderers. You can't really prevent that.
I wish you'd told that to Alex Carlisle when you had him on, because I mean that's the whole point of the.
Well, I would have done if he'd given me the opportunity to speak, except for he kept interrupting me. But
you kept interrupting him, Mike.
No,
sorry.
It's my show.
I've just played the clip.
It's my show. I'm not interruptible, right?
Well, either it's your show or you didn't keep interrupting him. I'm not sure which is.
Well,
which
I always say, you and I have an understanding. I'm very happy for you to keep talking, but occasionally other people are not as good as you at stopping talking, so I have to interrupt them in order to make a point. Let me ask you one final question. Piece of the Telegraph today: Merseyside detectives wanted to provide details about the killer's background, including his religion and his crimes, but they were warned not to do so by the Crown Prosecution Service. Are you going to tell me that the Merseyside police don't understand the rules of contempt of court? Because I bet they do.
Well, but I think these things are complicated.
Yeah,
but there are rules of contempt of court.
I know there are.
And there is a perfectly reasonable debate to be had about what could be disclosed and what couldn't be. But I don't think that
that's all I'm doing.
I don't want, and I certainly don't think that Nigel Farage and his lot are engaged in a reasonable debate. I think they're trying to cause trouble. They're trying to spread theories, and I don't think that is going to help prevent this kind of thing happening in the future, which is very, as you say, very, very difficult, because you're talking about psychologically disturbed individuals.
Exactly.
Although this guy didn't plead insanity or anything.
He didn't plead guilty until this week, by the way.
Well, yeah, it is very, very difficult to prevent this kind of thing. But there are people who are trying in good faith, people like Alex Carlisle, to try and deal with these
Not
problems.
anymore, not since he got kicked off the board.
before they arrive.
You know.
And I think we should recognise how difficult that is, which you've just done, instead of giving people such a hard time.
Well, yeah, but he can't sit there and tell me Prevent does a great job, because it doesn't. It's as simple as that.
You don't know. You don't know what it's
preventing. Of course I do. Well, I've just said.
By definition.
But as I've just said, you know, it's a bit like me saying I've just saved the world, right? I've just stopped an incredibly dangerous plot to kill the Prime Minister, right? Oh, what can you tell us about it? I can't tell you anything about it. So you don't really know.
Well, this is what the security services do all the time. They're always telling us that they've foiled these plots, and we've got no way of knowing whether it's true.
And I believe them.
Have to take it on trust.
Anyway, I can't take everything on trust. I'm a journalist, John, as I said. Maybe it's time for you to write another biography of a Prime Minister. John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator of The Independent, thank you very much indeed. This, of course, is where the nation comes to talk. It's the home of common sense. We're going to speak to Michael Mansfield coming up next on Talk.
Simple, basic things like there's only two genders. Hallelujah. Drill, baby, drill. If only Ed Miliband could get aboard that agenda and use the liquid gold we have in the North Sea. And to say that there was a national emergency on the border, using the troops to defend their southern border, to throw everything at it to make sure that people in this country are safe. If Keir Starmer's got anything about him, he would roll out the red carpet to Donald J. Trump with a state visit, allow him to address Parliament, allow him to have a state banquet, and allow him to come to this country and actually pull us in the right direction.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:26. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Sally in Islington, no, I've had that one already. Andy from Bristol says, if you wanted Keir to announce that the Southport terrorist wasn't a Muslim, what else should he have said he wasn't? Irish, Russian, a Christian, left-handed, a snooker player? It's a bit ridiculous to expect him to come out and list things that the evil killer isn't, don't you think? Says Andy in Bristol. Well, yeah. I mean, I think the point is that, you know, we all expect the truth from our elected leaders, and that's all I'm really asking for. Let's speak to Michael Mansfield, KC, barrister of some renown. He spent his career taking on some of the most controversial cases of our times, including the Birmingham Six, Bloody Sunday, the striking miners, Stephen Lawrence, Hillsborough, Grenfell. I think he's been involved in the Salisbury poisoning case as well. Michael, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, we're having a bit of a roustabout this morning about, you know, the kind of things, I suppose, which are very complex and complicated in the sense of the legalities or otherwise. My argument is that, you know, there's a Keir Starmer statement yesterday about how he didn't want to give any details away of the Rudy Cabana case because he was frightened that they might affect a trial. I take that point, but I also am slightly nervous, having been a journalist for many, many decades, that I don't want to see the government or the judiciary basically saying you can't talk about anything at all to do with this case. You can't mention any of the details of any case as soon as somebody is arrested. I think that's, you know, sort of anti-freedom of the press. I think it's informative. And I think the public deserve to know certain things when somebody is arrested, don't you?
Yes. I could stop there.
Thank you. Well, but that's really all I really need you to say.
I think what I'd just like to say is there is, I mean, lawyers are known for saying this. There's a balance between a couple of rights here. The right to know, obviously, and the other one is the right to a fair trial.
Yeah.
It's not, Keir Starmer was DPP for a long time, and therefore he's very experienced. So that you have to bear that in mind. But I think in this particular case, he would have been entitled to say to journalists, at this stage, all I can say is there's a potential, that's all, a potential for this being a terror-related case. The problem he faced and the police faced was that this, as far as one can tell, and he's yet to be sentenced, was a lone individual. So it wasn't a conspiracy or anything like that. And the real problem was whether, and of course this goes back to the definition of terrorism, and the base of the allegation of terrorism is whether you're wanting to influence government for political, racial, or whatever reasons. Now, I think obviously you can see in this case why there was a problem, because they find Al-Qaeda bomb-making guidance and so on, a book about that. They find ricin. It looks pretty much as though it might be, but it looks, and now, of course, looking back, they're able to say in the context that it was this individual, but that doesn't mean to say he hasn't got a terror-related, because if you possess items that might be of use to a terrorist, then you're guilty of a terrorist-related offence.
Right.
Now, I think Keir was perfectly entitled at the time, if he wanted to say it's potentially related to terrorism,
right,
but I can't give you the details. The problem about police conferences has often been in the past, they give too much detail and it's very adverse to an individual who's been arrested.
Yes. And I think the problem as well is that, you know, in other cases, and I'm not necessarily including ones that Keir Starmer was involved in, but in other cases, you know, the word terrorist has been used pretty quickly after the event, even sometimes before a charge has been brought. You know, when Joe Cox was killed, he was a terrorist, the guy that did it. He was charged with terror-related offences in the same way that other incidents have happened, lone wolf incidents, as you might say, and the word terrorism has come out. And so I'm just wary of the fact that, you know, having done this job a long time, there used to be a lot less concern about somebody after they'd been arrested than there seems to be now. You know, the difference between being arrested and being charged was quite stark. You know, when I was working in Fleet Street, as I did for many years, when a charge was brought, suddenly that was when all the curtains came down, the sub judice kicked in, and you couldn't do anything. But while somebody hadn't been charged, there were quite a lot of things you could say.
Yeah, well, I have to say I'm on the other side of the fence, and I've been very wary the other way, that because there was such perceived freedom prior to charge, all sorts of things, I can give you many cases where material got into the press and so on, which, not just the press, but the media generally, that was, again, potentially risking a trial. So it's a very fine balance.
Yeah.
But he could have gone further here. There are other situations where the investigation itself would be prejudiced if material detail was let out. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is you may need to actually present a lot of detail because for example, here, ricin, in Salisbury, it's Novichok. You want to warn the public about the dangers.
Yes.
So these are all factors you have to bear in mind all the time.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that Keir may have erred on the side of caution. Of course, he would say, as an ex-DPP, well, that's my job to do that. I don't want to prejudice anything. But on the other hand, you as a journalist would say quite rightly, well, we need to do a little bit more. And of course, that if a little bit more had been said, it would have, I think, circumvented some of the outrageous stuff that was put out.
It would have done, yeah.
And you know, which has had to be withdrawn since, you know, the immigration point, the Farage point that he was asking, you know, all that would have been undermined if he'd actually gone that extra mile.
But that's my contention, really, that his caution has actually caused a bigger problem in a way. And I think we've seen over the course of years that there are certainly indications whenever an incident happens, when the police are reluctant to give a name or when the police are reluctant to release information, the public, rightly or wrongly, jump to all sorts of conclusions. And it would be surely better. I've always said, you know, I much prefer the antiseptic of light rather than darkness. I much prefer, you know, knowledge rather than ignorance. I much prefer facts rather than nothing, you know. And I think we need to be careful that we don't end up going down this route where we don't get to do anything. I mean, I've had a couple of journalists on today arguing with me saying, don't question the CPS, don't question the authorities, don't question anything. Well, I'm sorry, that's not what I was raised to do.
No, I think you're entitled to ask questions, but they're also entitled not to answer them if, and I mean, the wording has to be remembered, the Contempt of Court Act, that's the test. The test is, does the disclosure you're about to make or the comment or whatever pose a substantial risk of serious prejudice? Now, that's the test. Now, of course, if the core issue is going to be whether this man is a terrorist or not, then you've got to be very careful what you put out at the beginning because, you know, people jump on bandwagons.
Right.
So supposing he had gone a step further, the same factions that got themselves onto the streets all over the country for what the judges called idiotic rioting, then I think it may have caused a backlash of a different kind. And obviously, he could have said he's not an immigrant, and he could have said all the things he's not. And of course, you know, by the time you've gone through a whole list of what he's not, it's all a bit ridiculous. So I think you're entitled to ask questions, but you're also got to bet you as a journalist. I'm not saying you're not. I think most journalists are responsible. In the mainstream, they're responsible. You understand that there's a limit, and if the DPP says, "I'm sorry, I can't give you more detail because." It would prejudice the trial. You'd have stopped there, wouldn't you?
Of course, as long as the indicators in all of these things are that they're being entirely truthful. But we also know that there have been allegations of two-tier policing. There have been allegations of some people being treated differently on marches and other people being treated differently. You know, we also know, you know, it's not a perfect world that we live in, Michael. And so, therefore, sometimes I don't take the word of the authorities and
no,
keep
I'm not suggesting
you know,
you should.
because imagine if we had done all that, and some of the cases that you've been successful in, and some of the cases that you've brought would never have been brought if that was the case. And so, all I'm saying is that the public's kind of trust in the government right now is pretty much at an all-time low. And it wasn't any better when the other lot were in. I'm not saying it's particularly about Keir Starmer, you know. But politicians in general, I think, need to do a lot more and do a much better job, as do the police, as do the CPS, in convincing us that there aren't, you know, other issues that they're just not telling us about, you know, because I think that's what breeds this kind of discontent and sometimes conspiracy theories.
I think as a general principle, there's no issue with that. The problem here is you've got the potential for a trial. That's all. And therefore, there has to be an element of difference. It's different to this, if you like, debate that I had with you this morning. You know, of course. And in general terms, I'd be with you. I have no particular love of politicians, I have to say, and I think everybody knows that. But at the same time, I am conscious that as a lawyer, there are certain principles that are enshrined. And if you were on trial, you'd want the fairness of the system to kick in to prevent you facing all sorts of false allegations that are being made by the right wing or whoever, on the streets of the United Kingdom. So that's the thing that has to, and one always has to remember, if you were on trial, would you want this or not?
No, indeed. But again, I mean, the trial would be about what the allegations were in a courtroom. It wouldn't matter what they were being said outside it, really, at the end of the day. But we could do this all day, and I'm sure you've probably got better things to do. So thank you very much indeed. Michael Mansfield, KC, renowned barrister, who I think pretty much agrees with me that Keir Starmer could, if he'd wanted to, said a lot more, basically. And that's all you need to know. That's a very renowned and respected barrister saying that Keir Starmer basically didn't get it right. The end. Thank you very much indeed. 9:37.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:40. We're here till 10 o'clock. Of course, Julie Hartley-Brewer coming in right then to tell us what's coming up on her show. And, of course, so much to talk about today. We've been mostly mainlining on Keir Starmer and what he said yesterday. He's facing MP's questions, of course, at midday today, Prime Minister's questions. He's almost bound to, I would imagine, be asked more about the situation with the Southport killer and whether he should have said more at the time, whether he should not have been quite so cautious as he was, and maybe, just maybe, Kemi Badenoch will actually get the truth out of him as to why he did what he did. But on the front page of the Daily Mail today, Rachel Reeves hit by the biggest job slump since COVID. As she heads to Davos, there's fresh alarm over the faltering economy and warnings from investors of a debt spiral. Well, let's talk now to James Watt, who is, of course, the founder of Brewdog, the very, very successful brewery right here in the United Kingdom. He's from Scotland originally. He's basically said that there has never been a more difficult time to start a business in the UK. It's like that old joke, James, isn't it, where somebody says, you know, how do you start a small business in Britain? You know, start off with a big one and watch it sink into oblivion. But, I mean, it's not going well, is it?
I am so nervous about the future of the UK economy at the moment. There's never been more millionaires leaving the UK,
right.
30 a day. These are the job creators, the wealth creators, the people who pay a disproportionately high proportion of taxes. It's such a difficult time to be an entrepreneur, so difficult to set up a business. almost 200,000 small businesses failed last year. The environment, the climate is just so difficult. And Labour, with their budget, have taken a difficult situation for businesses and just made it far, far more difficult. And I believe we're actually going to have a recession this year, and like I said, just a very, very difficult time for the UK economy and for businesses in the UK overall.
And for guys and businesses like yourselves, which is I don't want to insult you by calling it medium size, but I mean you employ probably a lot of people. Your national insurance bill is probably going up. I've got a friend in Scotland who runs a bunch of businesses. His national insurance is going up by £250,000. There's nothing he can do about it. He can't put his prices up. You know, he's in hospitality. He can't, you know, get rid of people because he needs all the people that he's got working for him. He can't get around the national insurance rules, and so for an awful lot of people there's a lot of pain coming.
A huge amount of pain, and for me, like no economy has ever taxed their way to economic growth. The national insurance, when it hits, we're going to see unemployment increase, and there's very scary unemployment numbers coming out today. I think it's going to tip us into recession. Prices are going to have to go up a little bit. It's just going to make it so much more difficult to create jobs and drive the UK economy forward at a time that we need it. And the only answer the government probably has is more debt at a time where our debt is already crippling us. It's taken up far too much of our taxes, and we just increase the burden in future generations.
Right. And I mean, presumably people like yourself, again, you might have had projects that you wanted to explore, you might have had investments that you wanted to make in new products, you might have wanted to, you know, do some more research or something like that, or hire a bunch more people. I presume all of those things are currently on hold, are they?
Absolutely. It's not just for my business, it's for pretty much every UK business. So I was speaking to a CEO of a UK hospitality business. It's got a few hundred venues, and he's like, this is going to cost us an extra 35 million each year. That's 35 million that we can't invest in growth, in the economy, in services, and making things better for our customers. But then half of that 35 million would be invested in services, construction, kind of making their facilities better. So it's just a huge hole that this is going to leave. And for me, what's left is just economic pain for the UK at a time when things are really, really difficult for businesses.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we got statistics this morning that said that the government last month alone borrowed almost £18 billion. And, you know, they keep talking about, I mean, Rachel Reeves gave an interview the other day to the BBC in which she talks about her mother, you know, keeping all the receipts of everything and making sure that she didn't spend more money than she was getting in and all of this. And, you know, we didn't have a lot of money. My mother was you know, and you're just kind of going, are you economically illiterate? How can you borrow that kind of money when you know that the returns that you're getting in are actually diminishing because they're not getting more tax coming in? Yes, they'll get more national insurance probably, but on a general level, I think a lot of the measures they've tried to bring more tax in aren't going to work.
I mean, the debt is a massive, massive concern. And one of the things that I found most damaging about the budget was the reclassification of our debt to enable more debt. I mean, for me, it was the equivalent of a toddler pushing a clock forward a few hours to extend bedtime. So you get a little bit of fun, but you know you're going to pay for it very much the next day or in the future. And for me, what the government did with the budget, I am all for paying taxes. I'm all for investing in services and building the society that we want to live in. It's going to result in less tax revenue because we're going to get no economic growth. We're going to get a recession. Businesses are not going to be able to invest. So the government is actually going to get less tax revenue coming in, and it's just going to have to further increase taxes or get to borrow more. Yeah.
Do you think at any point they're going to sort of wake up and go, oh, actually, maybe we need to turn around this ship of state and we need to actually take a different approach?
Well, I actually wrote about this a few weeks ago, so I think we're probably technically in a recession at the moment. I think by the time we get to kind of May or June, the economic pain that the UK is in is going to be so severe that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves is going to have to wake up to that, and we're going to see perhaps a mini budget, perhaps relaxing of debt rules so they can borrow more, but like something is going to have to give in the next 6 months if nothing changes, and I'm scared about what that's going to be.
Yeah, I know. It's not good news, is it? James, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. James Watt, founder of Brewdog. Very concerned about the future, very concerned about the present, to be honest, and very concerned about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who doesn't seem to understand finance. It's got to be a bit of a worry, that, hasn't it? 9:46.
simple, basic things like there's only two genders. Hallelujah. Drill, baby, drill. If only Ed Miliband could get aboard that agenda and use the liquid gold we have in the North Sea. And to say that there was a national emergency on the border, using the troops to defend their southern border, to throw everything at it to make sure that people in this country are safe. If Keir Starmer's got anything about him, he would roll out the red carpet to Donald J. Trump with a state visit, allow him to address Parliament, allow him to have a state banquet, and allow him to come to this country and actually pull us in the right direction.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:49. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Greer will be here in about, 10 minutes or so, or less, to tell us what's coming up on her show. Mike, I'd say the file dealing with trust and transparency hasn't gone across Keir Starmer's desk yet. Great show, very lively, says Patty in Colston. Yeah, it is. Well done, Mike. You're the Trump of Talk TV. Keep it up. I'm not sure if that's a compliment. I think it is. Martin in County Durham. Thank you. We are joined now by Ashley Armstrong, business editor of The Sun. Very good morning to you.
Hey, morning.
Nice to see you. We're going to talk about Davos in a second. Just a final voice note from Jane on Southport.
Hi, good morning, Mike. Everybody's talking about what Keir Starmer said yesterday about how he wasn't going to prejudice the idea or the conviction of this young boy. Every time there is an attack on this country, there is usually given that it's an emergency. And the first thing they say is whether it's terror-related or not. So in this case, they could have done like they did with Manchester Arena. They could have said it is terror-related, it's terrorist-related. So what's the difference there?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's one that we'll be discussing, I'm sure, all through the day here at Talk with Julie Hartley-Brewer, Jeremy Kyle, of course, at 4, Ian Collins at 1, Kevin O'Sullivan later on at 7. Let's talk about Davos now, though. Ashley Armstrong's here. Great piece in The Sun today. It's the Davos World Economic Forum in Skegness, a place called Davos Way. I mean, I know times are tight, but they couldn't spin you a flight out to Switzerland, and so here you are in lovely Skegness.
No, I don't think I would have been serving our readers to be jetting off.
No, well, see, that's a very refreshing way to look at it.
To be going to Davos, and so it was this thing. We found there's Davos Way in Skegness,
right.
And I thought, well, rather than speak to kind of the global elite and kind of have that kind of bubble, let's speak to the real businesses of Britain who are kind of facing their own challenges. And they're meant to be it's a chin-stroking annual affair of how to fix the world's problems. Well, actually, the Chancellor's flying off to Davos and is landing today, and meant to be tub thumping for showing that Britain is a good place to invest.
Right.
Well, her own British businesses in this country are saying that actually some of the problems about investing have been caused by her.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, we just spoke to the boss of Brewdog, James Watt, who was saying he's never known a worse time to start a business in Britain than now.
Yeah.
And he speaks to people all the time who are CEOs of quite big companies. The national insurance cost that's kicking
that was
in
something that they all raised.
Because it's something that really hurts people. It's,
Yeah, and it's those businesses in the everyday economy which I think seems to be completely blind to the Labour government, because there seems to be this lack of actual business knowledge in the government that, yes, you might give them a little crumb there, but when you look at all of the taxes that has come in the budget and all the other things that they're facing, it's a hugely challenging environment for all of them. And not one of them, and these are savvy entrepreneurs. They don't want to be...
These are the people that are the backbone of the British economy, aren't they?
Absolutely, and they don't want to be losing jobs. They don't want to be shrinking. They don't want to be shutting their restaurants, but they are having to. That's not growth.
That is not growth, and there isn't any growth, and there isn't any sign of any growth. And as James Watt said, you know, he's never known of any growth ever coming from higher taxes. You know, the more you tax people, the less money they have.
Yeah,
it's
higher
that simple.
taxes don't equal growth.
But they've got this kind of socialist idea, haven't they, that, you know, all good comes from the central government, and only the central government can boost the economy, and only we can spend money in the public sector and create all these jobs. But they haven't really created any jobs, as far as I can see, apart from in the civil service, where they seem to have hired loads more people.
Not yet. And there is that kind of, you know, you're just taking from kind of the private sector and putting it into the public sector, which has a big track record of being fairly inefficient about spending that money. And you think of the waste levels that go in central government and across the public sector, compared to, you know, a savvy businessman who or businesswoman who lives and breathes their business, and they make their own budget decisions depending on the environment. They are used to kind of being efficient. They're used to being ruthless.
Yeah.
That's how you make money and survive in business.
Right. But Davos this year does seem to me to be a bit of a sort of pound shop version of Davos, you know, because you've got Rachel Reeves and Jonathan Reynolds, going out there, who's the business secretary. You know, I don't really see those two and the global elite in the same sentence, really. They don't strike me. I mean, certainly Jonathan Reynolds is not part of the global elite, and I don't think she is really either.
I don't think he'd mind not being seen as the global elite.
Right.
I mean, it's fair to say that, you know, the Chancellor tried to paint herself as super pro-business in the run-up to the election, right? There was loads of schmoozing with city bosses. You know, she was always kind of, you know, they had the investment summit where they had kind of global leaders, and she wanted to position it as that. But how can she say that the government is unashamedly pro-business when businesses in this country are saying, no, you're not?
No.
There is
and
not
you're doing
growth.
nothing for us, frankly.
Yeah.
And also, it used to be, to me, it's almost a kind of a slight anachronism, Davos, now, because I can remember back in the days when, you know, when he was Prince Charles, he would turn up sometimes, and then you would get Greta Thunberg making a speech, and you would have that kind of star quality of people, and, you know, presidents of America would come. Trump's not there. He's going to, I think he's going to zoom in, isn't he? So he's going to mail it in, as they say. Starmer's not there, so there's no sort of tech chiefs. Elon Musk, the Mark Zuckerbergs of this world. They're all with Donald Trump in America, where it suddenly seems as though that's the focus of business right now, because that's where the business is going on.
And from the readouts from Davos, that has been, you know, and Monday was completely overshadowed by Inauguration Day, right? And, you know, you have these global leaders who might have been poo-pooing about Trump, you know, a few years ago, suddenly are having to switch their attention back and cozy up to Trump.
Yes.
And actually the man of the moment isn't there. You know, that is their opportunity to
and they all, you're absolutely right. And I mean, Wall Street, for example, has already now moved away from all the DEI stuff. They've said they want people back in the office.
Fast enough.
No, they want people back in the office 5 days a week.
Absolutely.
The JP Morgans of this world, the Goldman Sachs and all those kind of groups are saying, no, we want to be at the table with Trump. We want to be showing him that we are ready to play. We're not going to start appointing people just because of their diversity. It's great to see, actually. But it's almost like Davos is in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's the wrong part of the world.
It's incredibly
America's
difficult
where
to get
everybody
to
wants to be.
as well. It's one of those things. I mean, they still
it's halfway up a mountain, isn't it?
Exactly. And if you see the motorcades that struggle to try and get up, but there are still about 100 billion billionaires that are going. And one person said to me, it's amazing. You know, it's the one place where it doesn't matter how many billions you've got. There's probably always somewhere
there's a pecking order,
than you.
And it's also, is it not usually when they, particularly annoying when they go on about global, you know, planetary issues in the environment, where they're all jetting in private jets.
Yes, something like 1,000 private jets have been flying in. So when you're talking about kind of emissions, there is this overwhelming sense of hypocrisy.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous. And of course, yesterday, I mean, I meant to mention it at the end of the show yesterday because it just popped up suddenly on TV. David Beckham turns up in Davos.
We've got star appeal with there.
I mean, he is a star, but it does strike me that, you know, it has gone a bit chavvy. You know what I mean? I mean, who's going to be there next? Somebody from, you know, The Only Way is Essex.
Yeah, but as we know, rich
The Only
and
Way is
powerful
Davos. Maybe they could do a whole new show.
Well, I'm sure that, you know, kind of the Sun will be getting well behind that if that's the case.
Yeah.
If we get the Towie cast in there.
The Towie cast in Davos,
Love Island there. But yeah, I mean, you do get that star appeal, and we always know that rich and powerful people like also being associated with a bit of glamour. They like being, because often that's not their world. So there's often a bit of joining up going there. Whether Davos is the place for it, I don't know.
I think it's all a bit sort of passé, to be honest.
Davos raised Skegness was lots better.
Yeah, I bet. Julie Hartley-Brewis here. Very good morning.
Why aren't you in Davos?
Well, no, I was in
She's gone to
Skegness.
Skegness because that's where the Sun readers are.
Yes.
You know,
fair enough.
Not many of them in Davos.
Absolutely. Richard Tice raised about how lovely Skegness. I've not been. Need to go.
It was grand.
Yeah, but I mean,
we know Keir Starmer prefers Davos to Westminster.
He does,
so I imagine
but of
probably
course,
anywhere in the UK.
true to form, he says he prefers it, but he's not there. And he's not going. And
Well,
instead,
Rachel's there.
Rachel
from accounts is there.
Also, can you tell me which part of global elite Jonathan Reynolds belongs to?
No.
I mean, sorry, it's Pound Shop, isn't it?
I mean, listen,
Pound
she
Shop
brings back
Davos.
some more investment than she got from China.
Yeah. Well, I've just had the Brewdog guy on saying he's never known a worse time to be a business person in Britain, and never worse time to start a business.
I'm sorry, what would he know? He runs a business. Why would he know anything about running a business and boosting growth? Michael, stop with your silly nonsense.
I know, it is.
Clearly, politicians who've never run anything and worked in a complaints department know better.
I know.
I mean, I keep telling you this.
Yeah, they should instead they should listen to Lord Alex Carlisle, who was on the show a bit earlier. The full row is on YouTube, by the way, in case you missed it.
You rowing?
It was a good one.
Like you.
He was the guy. He said Prevent's a great organisation, works really well.
Great.
And he says Keir Starmer did a good job yesterday explaining why he didn't give us any information about a killer who might have killed again or something.
Yeah,
just ridiculous.
The whole thing. I'm going to really struggle to swear on there today.
I know.
I really